on order the strategic planning retreat. It's Friday, February 18th, 2022. It's 9:03 a.m. Moment of silence, please. Mr. Root.
Mr. President, if you'd like to. Father, thank you for this beautiful morning, for the rain this past day that nourishes the land, and thank you for this opportunity to cast a vision, give counsel, insight, wisdom that they can't have on their own human abilities to see forward. We know that without a vision, the people will perish, according to your word, so we ask for vision, guidance, and something that would unify and be good for the people of this county and throughout the state and this country. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. Mr. Davis, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see, so we got discussion and prioritization of goals for strategic planning, including budget analysis to begin with. So, Ms. Brock?
Good morning, council, Norm, staff, IT, fan club, and the sheriff. Glad you're all here. Glad to be here. First, I want to thank council for allowing this opportunity for us to present our budget information for year-to-date, our projections for what's going to end fiscal year 2022, and where we are in all of the funds that accomplish the county county's annual budget. Not my clicker. So I want to first identify the funds. I feel like that hasn't been completely clear in the past, or not completely understood by all in the past, that Oconee County operates several funds, and I want to go through those funds super quick for you. So the annual budget is comprised of a general fund, a capital projects fund, special revenue funds, and the enterprise funds. We'll go through those funds individually. But the general fund is basic operating account for Oconee County with your general government side. The capital projects funds are designated funds and appropriated to set aside for capital projects throughout the county through various departments. Special revenue fund accounts are designated and restricted funds for specific, sometimes legally required accounting. And the enterprise fund, of course, is the rock quarry. We'll start out this morning with the revenue projection, history and projection for the general fund. This is, again, the operating general fund for Oconee County government. I don't know how much in depth y'all want to go, so I'm going to go, and then if there's any discussion, I don't mind being interrupted if there's something we need to discuss during the time period. I think a round table discussion is more helpful in some situations. So I'd feel comfortable at any time if there's a question or if y'all want me to stop and let's discuss something in particular. This packet seems awfully thick, and you'll see on your tabs, those are the actual slides. The materials behind each of the tabs on your slides is the backup material, providing the information that is on the main slide. This is the general fund, again, as I said, your property taxes, your intergovernmental license permit fees, fines and forfeitures. I don't need to read you all these, but I do want to tell you that the license permit and fees, the increase that you see there, significant increase, is for probate estates, building codes, probate advertising, register of deeds fees, and solid waste tipping fees, both at the landfill and at the transfer station. Property taxes include real estate, vehicles, boats, motors, homestead exemptions, delinquent tax, and fee in lieu of agreements. So when we look at property taxes, that's simply not someone's house or property. That is an encompassing category of revenue for the county. Charges for services. If you'll see here, I said I wasn't going to use a pointer, but look, I'm using it. It won't point at the screen now. So your charges for services here, you'll see that we had a little over $1 million increase. That increase is due to probate advertising, building codes, register of deed filing fees, tipping fees again, MSW and the landfill, and the largest portion of that increase was through building codes. So if you look at and this isn't on this slide, I'm gonna jump philosophically from one slide to another. Once we start looking at the mill trend and the value of the mill over time, on this sheet here, your general fund, your first year here, 2019, the value of the mill was $518,367, and we were operating on 4 mills less than we are today, 3.9 to be exact. Today, the value of that same mill is $586,604. So when you see an increase in the property tax and the revenues that we generate from property tax, you'll have to note that the value of that mill at one time was spread among less houses, less properties, less taxpayers. And as the value of that mill increased and the buildings increased and land exchange increased, that same expenditure based on that same mill generates more revenue for you, which is why we won't have to have an increase in the millage this year. We are experiencing the growth of the mill in the county, and that is very fortunate because it does keep the tax base at bay. Are there any questions on our revenue?
Yes, ma'am. Fees and taxes, what is it? That is just sort of a hidden tax, isn't it? And I noticed that Mr. Elliott was saying no taxes, but in the backup material, I seen you had it highlighted that you're increasing the fees on one item in particular
What backup material?
that we had last meeting, and I have it right here in my notebook.
Would you show that to me? Because Mr. Hart, this is not a proposed budget for the coming year.
Okay, well, I'm just,
Well, I just want to
I
make sure.
highlighted it to question it.
Okay, so there are several things, if you'll look in your backup materials here, this will be the second page behind the revenue slide where the intergovernmental is. You'll see highlighted portions on your backup materials. Those highlighted portions are just to highlight the significant differences in previous year's revenue and current year revenue. So that is not a proposed increase of any time. Does that make sense?
You want to look at this?
I'd be happy to.
Might take me a second to find it.
While he's looking,
Sure.
why such a huge delta or change in interest revenue?
So interest revenue, the treasurer takes the funds from Oconee County and does investments accounts for them.
Yeah.
With the amount of accounts that we have invested at various investment companies and banks, there is a fee now because of the tank in the economy to transfer and invest funds. The interest earned on transferring investments is negated by all of the fees that are associated with those transfers. So we just haven't realized the investment income. Essentially, that would be interest that you're earning on the funds we have in the bank.
So we'll correct that in the budget that we'll be working
Absolutely,
on.
we will. We will. So this is this current year's budget. So the copies mailed to certify, and this is under the register of deeds. Those are state set fees, sir. Those
Oh,
aren't
really?
county set.
Ms. Ball, can you put your lapel mic on?
I sure can. Thank you, George. All right, while I'm doing this, let's go ahead. Do we have any other questions on the revenue, history, and projection?
Ms. Brock?
Yes,
I have
sir.
a question. The fees that we charge are meant to defray the cost with regard to the service that's provided by the county to that particular fee payer, right?
Correct.
And so it's actually, instead of spreading the cost of that service that is for that particular individual or user across everybody in the county, it's meant to be paid for by the person who's receiving the benefit of the service. And there's a big, a big state lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, hey, it's got to be, if you're going to charge fees for things, it must be a unique benefit to that person. Otherwise, you just raise the millage and pay for it, those specifically road and communications fees. But, and I'm generalizing that, it's not, David could probably state it more succinctly than I can. But I think, it's important for us as council to realize that while fees may be deemed a tax, it is more conservative to apply a fee, a specific fee to a user or fee payer than spread it across everybody else who's not getting a benefit from that fee or from that service the county provides. So I think that's actually more conservative than, a tax increase. It's, if somebody's benefiting uniquely, they should pay a fee to defray the cost for the service that the county government provides.
And to touch on that just a little bit, to bring that full circle, so to speak, would be, so our building codes fees, even though we did have an increase in the value, because they had been previously, that homes, residential structures, and commercial structures had previously been valued at the 1997 assessment table for international building codes. Last year, when we came to council, we decided, and council voted upon, the approval of moving those fees and the cost for the permit fees to be conducive with the assessment year that we're currently in, which would be the 2019 assessment year. So those values that we took from 1997 to 2019, coupled with the fact that we've had 2 consecutive record years of building permits, increases a user base, obviously, but is simply a number. If you bought one M&M for $50, that's $50. If you buy a box of M&Ms, whatever that cost is, you're going to pay for what is in that box. So those are primary user-based fees. The fee increase that we see in certain departments, for instance, PRT, we had, again, 2 record years. The fees were nominal for the parks that we have available. Our winter rate is $15 a night. But because we book every night, it's not that the fee went up, it's the revenue went up because we keep hitting record after record.
I got a question, what Mr. Kane said. The way I look at it, if you go in to get a copy, who buys that paper? The taxpayers of Oconee County. Who owns that copy machine? It's either leased or own it. That's the taxpayers of Oconee County. Who goes and makes that copy? It's either a young man or a woman that's getting paid by the Oconee County taxpayers. And why we can double something, I don't see how that comes out that we need to do that.
Double what?
Any fee that we have.
We have not doubled any fee.
Well, we got the ones, I used to go in and record plats for $10, and now it's $25.
Those are state fees, Mr. Hart. The Register of Deeds fees are state fees. Those are not county established fees.
Okay.
Yes, there's statutorily required nominal fee base. I'd be happy to get Ms. Davidson in here to explain those further.
No.
But the state law requires certain fees for certain transactions in
I can't understand
courts,
that for the simple
registers
reason
of deeds.
that you've got, let's say, a C plat. You can put 2 of them on a laminated sheet. You got a 24 by 18. It will go on one sheet. It takes up the whole sheet, and you're getting charged the same amount for either one of the plats.
I think in some ways maybe this is something we should talk outside of it.
Okay.
I do realize it has something to do with the general public, but I haven't heard any other complaints or concerns about this. I'd be happy to look into this further and investigate. But as far as the fee structure goes, those are established and recommended by state law.
Well, the reason I said that, I've had people to ask me to go by and record plats, and it was $10, and the next thing I know, I go in there and it's $25, and I don't happen to have $25 in my pocket, so I got to hold it until I've got enough money to pay for it being recorded.
I'm next door to that office. I'd be happy to spot you.
But
I'll be there tomorrow.
it's the cost of doing business. You're talking about your personal business and what you're using in your personal business versus these fees. I don't record plats on a daily basis, but I'm charged things through the state that I have to do for insurance, my licensing fees and stuff like that, that continually go up. But that's not the county's fault. So be cautious of saying and trying to correct stuff that the county's doing wrong when it has absolutely nothing to do with the county. We're blessed to have the services, and we've put a lot of effort in getting these deeds online. It's one of the things you've been fighting for. So it makes things simpler, not just for your business, but for the taxpayers. So especially in that department, there's been a lot of great things that we've done where you can actually access the things on there. So I don't want this to turn into, let me show you what the county's doing wrong, because it confuses the general public when we stand in here, especially during this time, and talk about, hey, let me tell you how the county's charging you, because the county's not doing what you're trying to say it's doing. So I don't want to go through the next 3 hours of, let me point how bad the county's doing so that works in my favor. It's not, especially that department. I know since you've been on the same time I have, we've done things in that department to make things simpler, not just for your business, but for the taxpayers, and I believed in it. That's what we need to focus on.
Well,
We got enough negative in the world.
I would say that I am part of the reason that has progressed, because
agree
I've been
with you.
pushing on it.
I agree with you. And I don't think there's anybody sitting here at the table that doesn't agree with that statement. And we've backed it. But I'm just saying, let's don't spend 3 hours bashing.
Can I just make one other comment, Mr. Hart, specific to the fees? So the state set fees are required for each county. So when we collect those fees, we return monies back to the state. So a portion of what you're paying in that increase is state revenue.
Okay.
Okay.
You did state required and recommended. There's a way we can differentiate what's a recommendation versus a
So
requirement.
there's some statutory language, and I think Anna or Mr. Root may be able to clarify this. The recommended fee is that counties don't go in the red reimbursing the state. The state required fee is so that counties break even when they reimburse the state. The language in the increase last year was pretty wonky, in my opinion. I'm not normally a person who reads a whole lot of state statutes on fees, because in the past it's just always it is what it is sort of thinking. But I actually got into the documents and read some of the legislative language, and the recommendation was that if counties understood that they would be in the red. So basically the counties would be supplementing whatever difference there was from the user to the state. Do we have further discussion on our revenue history? Okay, we're going to move on to our expenditure history. As you'll see here, we have had a significant increase in expenditures that reflects the same increase we had in revenues. The general government increase is just about $2 million. Public safety increase is almost $6 million. This is a testament of council's commitment for public safety and quality of life measures for Oconee County citizens, residents, and visitors. Mr. Durham emailed a question 3 or 4 days ago now, where the fund balance usage was reflected in our budget, specifically requesting information regarding the Westminster Magistrates Facility, which this current year we authorized the use of $500,000 in fund balance for that expenditure. And under other financing uses, I realize my pointer doesn't work. Other financing uses is typically where your use of fund balance comes out. In our budget document, it does reflect as other financing uses, and for transparency moving forward, we will be adding a column for use of fund balance in there so that that is made clear for anyone that has a question about that. Our non-departmental expenses, you'll also see, have some strange fluctuations from 18 across to 22. This is a not normal year. This was an increased amount in 2018. As you all know, we are self-insured, and we had some really high claims in fiscal year 2018. As those go down for non-departmental in 2019, that is more of an average expenditure for a county-wide expense. Then you see what happened, COVID. We established the COVID non-departmental because we knew that there would be some FEMA allocation and some respite coming from either state or federal. And the best way for us to track that was to put it in one line item rather than charging department by department. So we would have to source all those revenue codes back once the expenditures came in. I hope that at some point our emergency fundings, I mean, we've had 3 years of consistent emergencies that have been quite expensive to the county and too expensive to the state and federal government. Luckily, as you all know, we have the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and we do have the ARPA funds to help mitigate some of those costs. But I did want to highlight what those fluctuations were. Are there any questions about our expenditure history? Is there anything up for discussion here?
I think one of the biggest things to touch on the self-insured part is the actual savings provided prior to us going self-insured. We've gotten better benefits. I think our employees have had less expenses coming to them based on everything that I saw beforehand. Because I, questioned that when I first kind of got on and then saw what we were paying before versus what we're paying now and how hard that group worked to kind of gather the benefits that we have now. So, huge asset to our employees, and I'm glad that that's able to keep on. And there is going to be years like that, but if you look at the expenditures before, they were far greater than that.
Correct. And just as a note, since we are self-insured, that is one of the primary recruitment tools, at least we use on our side. We don't have state insurance. Our benefits are exceptional compared to state insurance, and our supplemental insurances are very affordable for our teams. Once we look at salaries, benefits, and state retirement, it takes 8 years to get to the point where you're vested in state retirement. So it's very hard to recruit somebody based on a promise 8 years down the road, especially in a turnover situation that we're looking at in the past 2 years. Having that self-insurance, also having a PRN on staff, having the ability to have a pool for our prescription medications, which allows us to have a decreased, even for maintenance medications, say diabetes control. In the open market, those are very, very, very expensive medications. And because we're self-insured and that we can lock in those once a year and get those costs secured, we can spread that cost evenly amongst the staff that utilize those certain prescriptions at a very much discounted rate for those, which is a great benefit to staff.
Remind me again, how much is our stop loss coverage on health insurance?
It's $85,000, and there are exceptions once a blue moon for non-previous or non-known condition.
I thought a couple of years ago it was 50.
It has grown through the last couple of years because we've had such catastrophic things to happen, and of course the medical has really gone up too, so.
Okay.
So, the county's insurance is good. I think that does help with recruitment. But whereas like state agencies, they can have insurance when they retire. And one thing I look at is the sheriff's department not being in the police retirement system. Is there any way to look at separating and having the officers be able to be in that system to where when they retire?
So the officers are in the police retirement system. It's called PORS. They are in that, but their insurance is within our pool.
Right.
We could, if the sheriff agreed, evaluate the possibility of officers in the whole department being under the state insurance. So retirement and health insurance are a little bit different. So they are under the PORS because that's a state thing and that's typical. But if there's any interest in us looking at removing the sheriff's office from the self-funded pool.
Sheriff, what do you?
Certainly, I'd like to look at it, look at the cost. I do think the county insurance is very beneficial to our employees. It is great insurance, so certainly compare that to, but there's no opportunity, as you say, to keep it when they retire. As you can keep state health insurance when you retire. I think it's 10 years.
Yes, 10 years to be vested.
So that, that certainly may be something that we look at, or either we can put a start date on it. It's beneficial for a certain number of employees and everybody going forward, and everybody prior to that, so I appreciate, I would like to explore the cost and benefits of it.
You know, Matt,
Sure.
Thank you.
we'd be happy to do that. One of the other things I do want to highlight about the self-insurance is that we do have the ability to, our brokers do have the ability to negotiate with medical providers, and those are our in-network providers. And something that we did last year after realizing the benefits of mental health and counseling, especially after 2 years of the pandemic, sickness, and the tragedy of death for a lot of our staff with family members of COVID, we did waive all fees and copays related to mental health care. And at first I was a little worried that that message may be misreceived or misunderstood when I sent the email out. But much to my surprise, we have 26 people who regularly go for mental health counseling, and I have received word that this is an enormous benefit and to their health and happiness as an employee here. Going back for our expenditures, as you see, again with our previous slide and our revenues, we're having small but steady increases through the years. These increases are due to increased needs, increased expectation, increased demand, and increased growth in Oconee County. If we look at the census data, it seems misleading to a lot of us because we're all certain that those numbers can't be right. But what we really need to look at is the number of non-residential structures that are being built here in Oconee County and where that tax base is coming from. We'll get around to that in just a few minutes, but I want to make sure that when we look at the census numbers and look at our budget numbers and we say those things don't line up, well, they don't. There's more to that story and more to that picture than what is evident in those two items. Do we have any other questions, comments about expenses? Millage rate trends. I had mentioned the millage rates earlier and the value of the mill earlier. We didn't put them on all of them? Poodles. I'm gonna give up my page. Can somebody make some copies of this one page, please? I'm so sorry, thank you. We made some changes this morning, I apologize, technical. So as you see here, our operating debt service, economic development, parks, recreation, tourism, bridges and culverts, capital equipment, our emergency services, which is the 2.9, road maintenance, and Tri-County Tech. These are all designated mills for the expenditures as we listed in the funds earlier. So for our operating mills, you will see that there has been a mill increase from 57.6 to 63.9 in a 6-year period. Prior to that, there had not been a mill increase, and the value of the mill had remained steady for the previous 4 years. I think what we're experiencing here is we are realizing our growth. So the value of the mill, when Connie gets back with that paper, you'll see has increased about $70,000 per mill from 2016 till 2022. That growth is the same growth we have discussed earlier in meetings. We're realizing that growth, the building permit record-breaking, register of deed filing, property transfer record-breaking, assessed property, not just current assessed property, but the process of when something comes from building codes to the assessor's office once that certificate of occupancy is released and that assessment being done. Now, as you all know, this is a reassessment year, so the mill, we will have a 15% max. And I don't think there'll be a need for that. I think this will be one of those years where, again, we are realizing the growth of Oconee County and getting adjusted to the necessary requirements of such. When I spoke earlier about those non-residential structures have tripled in 5 years. That doesn't always mean student housing. It can mean multifamily housing or mid-range commercial. The point there is, with all of the non-residential, it still has a burden. It places a burden on the essential and required services. So if a non-resident calls 911, we're still going to respond in the same fashion we would as if it was a resident. The non-resident also requires solid waste, roads, taxes here, specifically the tax portion, because they have to have certain documentation for them to be able to get their non-residents. We dug deeper and deeper and deeper into the non-residential structures, and this, I can't prove this, but I have a theory that a lot of our non-residences, especially in our high-end residential non-resident, is that they're filing the non-resident here because it's cheaper than wherever they're living. 6% in Oconee County is still way less taxes than a lot of other counties, and especially in other states, when it comes to a luxury home market. The assessed property for taxable value, when you start to look, and you can see here in 2015-16 what the real property assessment was. This is the county-wide value of what we assess to base the value of a mill on. When you look at $320 million in 2015, that growth, the growth that I keep talking about, when you look at our assessed value in 2021, you've gone up $40 million. There's a $40 million growth assessment. This does not count fee in lieu ofs, this does not count homesteads, and this does not count agricultural exemptions. Do we have questions about the millage? Anybody want to discuss this?
So what's the estimate or best guesstimate, I guess, of the millage rate being valued at this next coming year?
We will very likely see that mill rate remain pretty close to where it is right now for the value. We're seeing exponential growth. You know, last year when we established the budget and went through the process, we saw the increase in the value of a mill. And I think that baseline has helped us get to a more normalized level of what we should be expecting from here on. Previous to that, we had undervalued the mill, not realizing the exponential growth, that the county had been and would be facing over the next several years.
On this debt service, it's dropped a mill. Does that mean we've paid something off?
So on your debt service, what that really means is your payment. So when you take out debt, just like with any other debt, personal or private, your amortization scale means on the front side you pay more interest, and on the back side you pay more principal. We've reached a point in some of our debt service that interest has leveled off and that some things will be paid off. When we get to our debt service page, Mr. Hart, we do have a chart on there on what current debt we have, how much the interest is on that, and the payoff date for that. Any other discussion about our millage rate trend, values of a mill, assessment process, or any of that? Perfect. Mr. Hart, this one's just for you then. So here's your debt margin. So again, we're talking about the assessed value of the taxable property, and that number keeps growing because the county keeps growing. And we don't have people coming here and building $60,000 residential structures, just so we know. We don't have any more of those. My house, I think in 1978 when it was built was probably considered on the high end of the brick ranches in Walhalla. I think now it's not. We drove through Tomasi up through going to Whitewater, and the number of homes and sites and structures. I went to Westminster 2 weeks ago. The number of homes and sites and structures, and they're not building the homes that most of us are accustomed to seeing in our county. We've hit a place where people are enjoying the fruits of their labor and have decided to plant a seed here in Oconee County to create their life in their way with a nicer home. So our debt margin here, so again, going back to that value, you'll see as our value increases, our ability to borrow increases. So our legal debt limit is 8% of the current assessed value for any given year. And that debt margin, as you see, my pointer doesn't work and my arms aren't that long, but it's that center column there. So you'll see that the net or legal debt margin here grows from 28 up to 38 million. So our current county debt, Mr. Hart, is here in your golden box. So the bond series for Echo Hills, that was for the mass grading a few years ago. Obviously, the Workforce Development Center is right in front of the former Hamilton Career Center on 188, where the county does have a contribution there, and for the detention center. Our interest rates are somewhere between 1.7 and 3.6% at max on those. And our debt payments are here, your terms are there. Mr. Hart, does that address those
Yes, it's,
appropriately.
Echo Hills, is that the one we paid $3 million to grade?
That is where Oconee Industry and Technology Park is now, and that's, I believe, 2.6 million. For the mass grading, there may have been some,
That's what I was just wondering.
I'd be happy to get that firm cost and provide that on the record at some point. You're jogging my memory, though. Mr. Root, you looking that up?
Yeah, well, I think it's 2.1, but I just remember that meeting.
So it looks like we just refinanced the detention center?
So we did because we got a lower rate. We did. Once we saw what was happening, and we saw that earlier with our own investments. Once we saw what was happening with the market and we saw that the interest rates were decreasing, we were like, hey, why don't we call a financier and get them to help us out to lower these bond payments some? And it did not lengthen the amount of time for payment. All right, we're waiting on Mr. Root back there, but we're going to move on if that's okay.
On the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On the future, on that, I know like I can kind of determine what dates those were taken out, but there's not necessarily, because I mean, obviously the Echo Hills was done while I was on, and it's just the bond series says 2013, but it wasn't taken out in 2013. It was that was just the series of that bond.
That's correct.
Can we add in for the next time, just say date, the, whatever it,
We
what
can.
date it was?
We can.
That way, because I know I was on the workforce in the Echo Hills, the detention center, I know obviously it says 2011, so I would assume what date that was taken out on.
Yes, that does make
Yeah,
sense.
that way, I know we got the maturity date on the outside, so you can kind of determine when that was done, but.
So the original issue
Mhm.
date even,
Or the ordinance associated with.
okay.
Yeah,
Council
you can put
approval
that,
of.
like, either right before that maturity year. I mean, obviously, the term, you see the term, but the terms can change.
Correct,
on if we
correct. Just like with the
decide to pay
detention
off or
center.
refinance, whatever it is.
Correct.
Okay.
And we did, as you all know, last year refinance fire trucks, and we're able to get an additional engine just on the interest, on the amount that we saved on the interest, without adding any length of time to
Do
that
we know
payment.
right now what the range is on interest rates for muni bonds?
So it's really interesting that you asked that. On a different and relevant note, we had a finance attorney here yesterday doing a real estate, or a closing for the air packs for emergency services. And I asked that same thing. And I also asked if it was time for the county to be graded or rated again through Standard & Poor or Moody. He said that he would have to do a little bit of research and get back with us. I wanted to check with Mr. Root, and of course, yesterday was a little busy with us working on this, so we hadn't had the time to sit down to do that. But I think that would be one of the things that we should put on the front end of a budget discussion.
So what is our rating right now?
Our rating right now, our annual review rating is A+,
Double A.
AA, which is an A+. I made them speak to me in layman's terms. One A+ to me sounds better than a AA. I did not understand the rating structure, but I'm getting more familiar with that.
Isn't the highest rating at AAA?
Yes. Any other
We have a
questions?
higher bond rating than the United States government, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So as you do see here, our current legal debt margin for our ability to bond or borrow money of any sort would be the $38,977,000. Any other discussion about our debt, what our debt margin is, and what our current outstanding debts are?
And just to be clear on that, we're not borrowing that money, we're just talking about what we could.
Correct. I believe 2 council meetings ago, a member of the audience, and I wish I could remember who, and it might have been 3 council meetings, asked how much the county could bond. And I wanted to ensure to let everyone know that we are in good standing as far as our finances are. And we are going to move on to the fund balance. This is something that is always, always, always the most interesting part of trying to balance and manage moving forward, because Oconee County does have a fund balance policy. In 2018, Oconee County Council ordained that Oconee County fund balance should be 25% of the annual budget for operating. And as you'll see here, now we wanted to break it down so everybody had a really clear idea of what these were. This past Tuesday night, I gave you all a copy of our balances for bank statements ending January 30th, 2022. Those copies, we use the same colors on, so everything you see in yellow would be your non-spendables. We want to make sure that you could relate these two documents together with clarity. So your non-spendables are at the top part of this page, and those are things that are designated for specific items and restricted from county use, whether by ordinance or any other means. Your assigned, your solid waste reserve fund, the health care reserve, what we had spoken about earlier about us being self-insured, transportation grants, OPEB reserve, which is a retirement, Duke Energy appeal. The reason we put that in there for the fund balance is because 2 years ago, Duke Energy appealed during, they had a 2-time appeal, and we wanted to ensure that we weren't estimating a revenue that may not be there for an extended period of time. That is not typical. You'll see that's why there's only one entry there. Subsequent year's budget is where there are encumbrances or rollovers. So if you'll look in your unassigned here, or your assigned fund balance here, that fund balance has depleted actually, because some of these things don't exist any longer. So it doesn't mean that there's money gone from that account there. It does mean that there is no further use for the money that was there designated for that certain thing, which in this case would be the Duke Energy and the subsequent years. So your unassigned fund balance is the fund balance that we're attempting to build to that 25% benchmark. And as you'll see, we've gone from 6 million to right at 11 million. Some of this was sheer luck. And I typically wouldn't say that because we're highly skilled and intellectual workers. But what happened in 2020 will probably never happen again. When the rest of the country shut down, South Carolina somehow managed to stay open. And the idea that people could go outside and get fresh air and hang out with their kids and still be away from people and away from the virus led them to Oconee County in droves. Those people came to visit one time. Then they got interested in houses. Then they saw our schools were great. Then they saw our government was awesome. Then they saw our law enforcement numbers are excellent. Then they saw a quality of life they hadn't experienced before COVID. So our fund balance increase, when I say luck, it was at the detriment to a lot of other communities, but we saw an influx of people buying property online, sight unseen. It has never happened before in the numbers that it happened here. Some of the transfer documents that we researched, literally someone would buy a piece of property in Oconee County, sight unseen, on an online auction. That's luck. We could market ourselves all day, and our marketing works. We can have a conventioner's visitors bureau all day, and that does work. But coronavirus did something that none of us could ever do, and it was give people hope for a better future. Because there was so much uncertainty in those first few months. So that growth we saw here, this jump we see right here, that's nothing that we can take credit for. Now we can make things better and take credit for that. But what happened there was no way for us to predict that sort of growth. So I don't want y'all thinking that this is going to happen again. That's a spectacular and unusual.
25%, I think is, we played my year, what is it, 2024 or 25, something like that?
Yes, no pressure on us.
So we're still over $3 million short of that.
We are, and I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide on that, and I can go back if we need to. So technically, right now, we're about 2.5 million short on that as the end of last year.
What's that slide at, the next page?
Yes, sir, and I can jump back between the two of those if you'd like to look. We can go back to the fund balance page if there's further discussion there.
Yeah, on that back page on the OPEB, when I first got on, we were missing retirement payments, $700,000 at a time to balance the budget and things like that.
Correct.
Which obviously we're allowed to do that as long as our retirement balance is a specific amount. But that always bothered me, and Mr. Kane had actually brought that to my attention. We haven't missed that payment
No,
in 5 years, 4 years now.
five.
Yeah.
5.
And I just wanted to, like I said, for what we're trying to do, if y'all understand, on that retirement, it's not, there's a specific amount that we have to invest in there, and obviously everybody's not gonna retire at the same time or pull all the money out at the same time, but it's not a good financial practice to get 6, 7, I think it was over $1 million behind when I first started on there. Because I know Mr. Kane had brought that up, and that was alarming to me that we allowed that, because it's kind of like you're always robbing Peter to pay Paul. Well, we don't have to fund this, but I think we've done a great job and continue to move forward, budget properly, and actually, that's one of the things that we have to focus on is that's what we have to take care of. That's the things that we've set aside that we do need to focus on and not get behind on, because every single time we got behind on something, it was always pushing to the next, the can smashed in the road is what I say when I got on. And I think we've done a good job at righting the ship, and looking at, proper taxation. A lot of taxation's gone down on properties. We've got, 50 to 60 plus that I just reviewed, that they've gone down since the last 4 years. And we've done good things like getting that OPEB reserve back where it's supposed to be, that is actually owed to the people that work for this county, and things that we have promised. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up because I thought that was a huge thing that we're not. Sometimes the other budget would show, 600,000, but you owed $1.2 million, or we were behind on capital vehicles by $2 to $3 million at sometimes. And so we've tried to work together to make sure we don't have those issues.
I really think that's a good point. And I think years ago, before we had the ability for our retirees to log in and check their benefits, long time ago when I first started working at the county, you would have to go to the HR office, fill out a form, mail it or fax it, wait for that information to come back before you could see or realize what your retirement benefit would be at 15, 20, 25, whatever years. Now we have a lot of people, especially after the COVID hit and just the nature of things in the world, the turnover that we've had, retirees are no longer interested in staying 35 years. Years ago, we could plan 6 or 8 months out on who was going to retire when. We've had some catastrophic health issues where we've had an emergency retirees. It's not the same world. So by us funding it fully now gives the employee the benefit of knowing that it's okay. But it also gives the county the ability to say, okay, we know we funded this, so we're not going to have to take these funds from somewhere else to cover what we knew we were going to have to cover in the first place. I don't really like doing the whole shell game when it comes to budgets. I'm not knocking anyone. I just feel like the best and most transparent way to present a budget is to give you the real numbers and give you all the real problems that we face as a government. That was a problem. It has been fixed. That cost may go up next year. As we start to look at the number of people that are employed at Oconee County, we have a window of staff that are here 7 years and less. We've got a smaller window of staff that are here 15 to 17, 18 years. And we've got a pretty significant window of staff that have been here over 20, 25 years. We're going to have a lot of retirees in the next 5 years. So that is very important for us to be able to cover that negated cost that seems invisible on the surface, but it's almost like a water leak behind your wall. It's there. It doesn't impact you making dinner, but it certainly will impact the structure of your entire home if you don't get that fixed, and that's what that is.
So Amanda, going back to the bond rating, I think we're in much better shape. What the last time the bonds were at the meeting, whoever, the bond rating, when was that?
I believe Mike Burns and I, when we were discussing this yesterday, I believe it was 2015.
So we're in much better financial shape now.
Considerably.
So I think we definitely want to get a review on that.
Considerably.
Ms. Brown, do the employees put anything into this, or is this paid all by the county?
Oh, employees contribute, and you have a choice on what to contribute. You have to contribute X amount, but you may contribute a greater amount. And we also have the 401k, that goes through the state as well.
What's the minimum contribution, like 9%?
9% it is.
Is this, but this OPEB reserve, isn't that employer side?
That's the employer side, yes,
Yeah.
but county employees have to have skin in the game.
Right.
And that's whether you're here 1 day or 6 months or 60 years. You're required to contribute to your own retirement day one, hour
I just want
one.
to make it clear that that's not employees' money.
Oh, correct. That's the
I mean, it
county
will be one
portion of
day,
that.
But it's employer funds.
Correct.
Contributions.
Correct. Okay, so our fund balance policy, I know we went through this briefly. You'll see that our fund balance has significantly increased. And we do have, I think, 2 years to get there. 3 years? Is it 2026? You would think I would know
I thought it
that.
was 24.
4 or 5.
We'll try our best. We will try our best.
Well, it appears that we'll add to it based on what you're estimating the revenues to be if we stay within the budget on expenditures.
Correct. Now, the downside about some of the expenditures is over the last month or so, we have noticed a significant increase in basic supplies for departments that provide services to other departments. The first one that comes to mind is vehicle maintenance. Brake shoes, belts, parts, what do you call those things? Oil filters. The expense is unbelievable. The increase in attire is unbelievable. So what we're looking at, and of course, the whole world is facing the inflation. So I don't think that that's something we're in a silo and we're alone. There are just some serious supply issues. And of course, we have a priority to keep the county rolling. We have a lot of emergency service and sheriff vehicles. And when they get X number of miles on their tires, we take those tires back in and reuse them for vehicles that wouldn't be at a higher speed or whatnot.
But we really should try as hard as we can, if we have to cut expenses toward the end of the year, so that we stay within the budgeted expenditure amount.
We will not go over budget unless there's something catastrophic unforeseen. And even then, we'll just turn all the lights off, turn the heat down, tell everybody go home to eat lunch.
We're saving money today.
So, hold on, I need to take one time out for a second. So a minute ago, I pulled my collar. I think Jennifer read it that I was hot. Well, what I'm doing though is this thing is taped on my back, so it's like pulling up on me. I'm not hot. Mr. Kane is cold. Can you turn it back up for him? I'm sorry.
We're saving at least $1.
I'm sorry. So seriously, unless there is something.
Control system, John. Actually, it is actually pretty amazing savings to the county already. So
It is. So yes, unless something seriously catastrophic happens, and Lord forbid we would have anything happen like that. And I feel like maybe we're on the upside of things, but if something does happen, obviously, we would make council aware of any and all expenditures. But I don't foresee us going over budget in any fashion with a normal functioning 4 or 5 months ahead of us now. So our capital projects funds. So these are separate from our operating funds. Remember we were talking about the funds earlier in the very beginning. This is just a recap to make sure that everybody understands that these are designated funds for designated things. And most of the time they have designated revenue streams coming into them created by ordinance by council. Oh, I'm pointing at the wrong thing. That's why. So in our capital projects fund, we do have the Economic Development Fund, Bridge and Culvert Fund, Capital Equipment and Vehicle Replacement Fund, and the General Capital Projects Funds. So then, yes, ma'am?
I left off PRT, but there is a.
It was under the Economic Development one earlier. That's probably why. So the Capital Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund, and I know we're going to talk about all these funds, but just as a note, that has been a savior to Oconee County, and I don't know that y'all realize what an ease you have placed on our ability to provide service greater than expectation in a timely manner without beating our staff to death. Y'all purchased last year a hot box for asphalt. I read the AIS. I've talked to Kyle about it. We met with procurement. We actually looked at a couple of videos online and modeling. And it didn't occur to me until the day before the council meeting that I was reading the agenda and the agenda item summary again. And I look at this piece of equipment and there's the pictures in the backup. And it dawned on me that previous to our purchase, our guys were using shovels. Shovels to move asphalt around. Like it was 1975. That capital vehicle replacement plan, one, is given life longevity to our staff. Two, has probably decreased, I haven't done the research, but I'd love to do this at some point, decreased our workers' comp claims because nobody's handling 60 pounds of asphalt 400 times a day to load a truck with. And the fact that they're happy to come to work and get the job done, Kyle said the other night, we can do
30.
30?
It's double in a
It's
day.
more, yeah, it's a little more than double the amount of road repairs.
And it holds, because I was, me and Mr. Hart on the transportation, he said it actually stays because it's hot.
Yes,
Going in there, so they're able to do,
instead of having to throw it out.
and during a week, they don't have to go back and forth, and the waste is cut in half because it stays hot during the time. So I mean, that was a huge need. And I know there's still potholes out there, so I know people will be like, well, there's a pothole on my road. Well, we're getting to them 30 at a time instead of 15 at a time.
Yes,
So-
and most of our work orders are reviewed and completed within a 7-day period. Yeah,
I
so,
wish there's a way we could educate the public on differentiating between state roads and county roads.
so
On that.
I think that I think we have some mechanism to get better at communication. We'll probably need someone that has a better scope of what we want to communicate and not just write a press release, not knocking any of the press releases we send out, but I think to be a more emergent and immediate form of communication, social media for one. I'm getting off track here. Mr.
On
Hart,
that
you try and keep me on
same
track?
issue, Mr. Reed said that there was a map with all the county roads.
There is, and
on it.
we're moving that to the
Yeah,
road department
yeah.
page.
But you had to go from here, jump over to here, and then jump up to here, and then jump to here, and ask for the maps. So he's trying to make it where it's
Correct.
streamlined.
It was all online, but there were 6 clicks, because I did
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what he said. It was 6 clicks.
Yes.
Get there.
Streamline that down to 1 or 2. So.
But if someone has a problem with a road, they can go to the SCDOT complaint site, and if it's not check with Amanda on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's not a state road, they will forward that maintenance request.
So
onto
typically it's the other way around.
jurisdiction. Okay.
90% of the time, people call us and not the state because we're more responsive.
But they can fill out a form online. I've done it as well.
Correct, yeah. But typically, it's the other way around.
Somebody calls me once a week about a road, and 90% of the time,
That's a
It's a
decrease
state
of like 50% from 10 years ago.
I believe we really ought to put pressure on our county delegation. I mean, I hear now they're gonna widen 26 from Columbia, connected to Charleston, another lane, and I just don't see the money. I mean, we're paying a penny extra every year on the gas tax. Which they've gotta do something about, because we've got electric cars, that tax is gonna go away, but we need to put pressure on them, that they put the pressure on the right people down in Columbia, that we get our fair share of road work up in here in Oconee County, because I don't see it happening right now.
It's design projects as well. That's the other part about it that we have to be cautious about as well, is they'll bring up a project for Oconee County and we look at it. I mean, we had the roundabout that was actually going in the heart of Oakway, and it's like, I just don't really understand why. And I think it was a $1.5 million project. And there's a roundabout, if you're gonna put a roundabout, it needs to go out in Fairplay on the 85 area to correct the old, I call it the old 5-star, close your eyes and go. That's an issue. And so I brought that up to Mr. Hart, and I said, here's the emphasis here. Now, there has been talks about a roundabout down there, and I'm not gonna sit here and talk about for or against roundabouts, but I'm just saying though, from the DOT, if you're not cautious when looking at that, it's like, we don't wanna lose the money, but we also wanna make sure it's spent. There's a Highway 24 safety improvement plan that's in place right now, and I think there's 9 to 10 different guardrails going down 24. That's what the proposal is. there's places that I know up in the mountains that there ain't no guardrail and there's been accidents on some of those turns. And I've got ditches that I've never known there to be there, that there's gonna be a guardrail that I don't know what the cost is. So I think with that, I think there's a proper way of, number one, making sure we know what the projects are. Number two, do we feel, I know it's not our job to say, hey, because it's the state money, but to put to the delegates, do we really think this is the top priority? Or, thank God we got Highway 11 paved. I know that was a Fed and state project, but, I mean, you come off the interstate on a pickup truck and, you know, you're bouncing around. It's one of the greatest things that ever happened to Oconee County is Highway 11 getting close to being completed all the way through. But I agree with what you're saying, but we need to make sure, I know Kyle and Rhodes does a good job of staying on top of that, but maybe we can go, why are we doing this? Because they spent $100 and something thousand on the study for the roundabout in Oakaway that's not gonna happen because everybody went crazy over it. So I'd rather that $125,000 go toward, you know, something we got to fix out there in Fairplay or somewhere, you know, guardrails in the mountains, to make it safer, so.
I know we'll be talking about priorities later, but I know, having heard a presentation in December from the Deputy Director of SCDOT, their main priorities are safety for these secondary roads. So that's why you see on 24, they're targeting, they're putting the funds where these roads are killing people, where they're so dangerous that people are dying. And so that's their number one priority, which I appreciate. And then also, in addition to that, you mentioned I-26. The state, that's a port that you gotta keep the goods flowing, and especially now. I mean, it's a huge supply chain issue. And if trucks are sitting in traffic because you only got 2 lanes, the state's saying, hey, we gotta just keep the goods flowing from the port and the containers back to the port and the cars back to the port. So I hear you. I wish our roads were better, but they're focusing on macro, you know, logistics problems and safety right now. And they're using a lot of that funding they received from the feds, this couple $2 billion. I think 400 million of that is going to I-26 widening. But yeah, I agree. And it's all about maintaining a good relationship with our legislative delegation. We have some very powerful and folks, you know, President of the Senate, Thomas Alexander, Senate President, Chair of Labor, Commerce, and Industry, Bill Sandifer, and then Bill Whitmire chairs a subcommittee and serves on the Ways and Means. They have the ability, and they have done it many times in the past, to make sure that we're taken care of, and it's just all about approaching them in the right way. And you know, you catch a lot more flies with honey than vinegar, and that's, I think, a lesson we all need to take to heart. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, John. We got to keep making sure that our friends in Columbia know exactly what we need, and I think it all comes back to communication. Talked about communication a lot, and going through this, we'll see more areas where the public thinks one thing and the truth is something else, and it's all about how we communicate with them and communicate with SCDOT or other jurisdictions. So,
Ms. Brock,
Yes, sir.
this is information. They're talking about the roundabout in Fairplay. The DOT is having a meeting the 3rd of March at 5:30 at the Baptist Church, and they're gonna have plans and lay out what they're gonna do down in Fairplay to relieve that intersection problem.
Okay, thank
That
you,
is,
sir.
and I got that from someone in Fairplay, called me and made me aware of it, and it requested that I be there.
Thank you. It's helpful information.
You know, we all have a pretty good grasp on the roads that are in bad shape in the county, the state roads. Maybe it could be a way where we could form a priority list that we see in the county to maybe help with the delegation, say, hey, help us out here.
That's a good idea. I think Mr. Reed would agree if he were here. Because our guys typically have to use all state roads to get to county roads.
Yeah.
You know, if you live on it, it's a county road. If you drive on it to go to work, it's a state road, very likely. So I think that Mr. Reed and the Roads and Bridges Division will be a good asset there to help us identify.
Because like Whetstone Road hadn't been paved in 40 years. There's no shoulder, there's no guardrail.
Right,
And you got horse trailers and campers
right. Chattooga Ridge, same thing.
all the time. Now, there's one part of Chattooga Ridge that they went through 5 or 6 years ago and paved and put guardrails.
Yeah,
in.
on the north side.
Yeah, it looks like a model highway.
Right, right, on the north side.
You know, that was probably something that Mr. Hart chairs Transportation Committee, you know, and I've served on it. You've chaired that for probably the entire time you've done council.
I have.
What, 6 years? If maybe we could begin that on the next meeting to try to get staff to provide information on what state roads they
Make
get the
that
most
note of
complaint
that
about.
for your strategic plan.
What's that?
Let's make a note of that when we
Okay.
get to our
All right,
strategic
yeah.
plan. So we're gonna move on to capital projects. Focus back on the money for a minute. Again, these are designated millages for designated purposes. All expenditures typically come through council and are driven by council. As you see here, the Economic Development Capital Projects Fund from 2018 till now, 2018, we had an expenditure of $6 million, and that was an investment in Oconee County-owned properties. We had an investment again in 2020 for capital projects, and these include some of the Destination Oconee before that mill was broken out. These are county investments by county dollars. Bridges and Culverts Capital Project Fund, as you all know, this is self-explanatory. It's for the replacement of bridges and culverts. We recently came to council for the Cherokee Lake 60 feet, Mr. Hart, bridge replacement. And this is one of those funds that you kind of have to let the fund balance build up before you can start making expenditures, because as you can imagine, building bridges and replacing bridges and culverts is quite expensive. Are there questions on these two designated capital project funds? Okay. Staying in the capital project fund, we have the capital vehicle and equipment replacement fund. Say that fast 3 times, although I didn't say it the way it's written up there. And the PRT capital project fund. That PRT capital project fund was derived from the previous economic development fund, which is why you see a 0 of actual here in 2019. That was a portion of the funds designated for the park expansions and recreational leisure expansions here in Oconee County. And we have previously discussed the capital vehicle replacement fund. Just wanted to see if y'all had any questions, comments about these two specifically before we roll. Perfect. This is the county's general capital projects fund. These are funds that are designated just as capital projects that are not typically annual recurring expenses for one particular thing, which is how this fund has a range of items in it. So you'll see that we do have the GEO bond construction, the Johnson Controls energy update, the airport improvement. Now that one is in the red because we have not received our reimbursables from the FAA. I don't want anyone to think that we have overspent by $700,000. We just have not been reimbursed yet for that and for solid waste permitting. These are typical capital projects that occur throughout just a normal functioning run of government that aren't so steady that we would need a designated or named fund for those. And in order for us to increase and maintain our transparency in financial accounting, this is why it's a general fund. If there is a one-time event, we will put it in this general fund. It's not something that would require a consistent revenue and expenditure source. So once these items are closed out, say once that, once the Johnson Controls is completely closed out, that one won't be on here at all. So it's not that those things don't exist. It's just that those don't require an annual funding source and expenditure. Moving on to our special revenue funds. These are the special revenue funds designated for emergency services, 911 communication, Tri-County Technical College Fund, and the Road Maintenance Fund. So if you notice in our other one, our Capital Projects Fund, we had the bridge and culvert replacement because those are capital, physical things you can touch to improve road conditions, bridges, and culverts. The Road Maintenance Fund typically is for striping, repaving, and maintenance for like large capital expenditures related only to maintenance, not replacement. We'll go through these pretty quick, so I know that y'all are anxious to get on to hearing about everything we did great in the last year. So the Emergency Services Special Revenue Fund is 2.9 mils. This was, I don't know, I think this fund is probably 15 years old now. This is for the direct allocation to the 17 member stations in Oconee County for equipment, supplies, and the $60,000 that each station does receive. This also helps offset the general fund expenditure for the assistance to our member stations and our volunteer support. The 911 Communications Special Revenue Fund is derived from the small 911 surcharge fee that is on every telecommunications, anything that you have ever touched. Recently, Oconee County approved 3 different pretty significant expenditures. I think it was 3, it may be 2. You know, they have the backup 911 operations center now. So those expenditures come out of this special fund for that purpose and does not come out of the general fund for Oconee County. Tri-County Technical College Special Revenue Fund is exactly what it is. The Technical College for the 3 counties, Oconee, Pickens, and Anderson, by legislative action is required to pay a certain amount annually for the operation and or capital expenses for Tri-County Technical College. That fund balance is increasing, which tells me that they probably have a plan for renovation or expansion in the future. Typically what they do is allow those fund balances to increase before they make a mark, so to speak, so that counties have a way to provide those required funds to the college without hitting the counties hard with an extra revenue request that year. Road Maintenance Special Revenue Fund. Again, this is where our paving, striping, and general road maintenance comes from. You'll see our fund balance there is about $2 million. I don't want anybody to think we're hoarding money in this account. In the next couple of council meetings, you will be receiving a request for a paving and striping contract and should take care of most of the fund balance in these funds. And last but not least for certain, our Rock Quarry Enterprise Fund. This is, I'm going to be punny for just 1 second. This is a gym. Y'all got to wake up. Oh, it's a bad pun? Okay, so it's rock solid. Better? All right, Mr. Root, I'm going to have to move on. So as you all see here, and you know what, while we're talking about the Rock Quarry, thank you for your support. We're on track now. Everything's working fine. And I do want to say that with the Rock Quarry, one thing we did in the last year, and this is in the annual report too, was we got software designed so we could do a text communication to all customers. And it has been the greatest, most wonderful thing ever. Because customers aren't driving to us with an expectation of one thing or another. And if we even sense there's a problem, we can send a mass text out. So we don't have the expectation of people being able to just roll up and learn we have a problem or a belt broken or sand in the pit or a too short of a berm. Back to the money. So this is the Rock Quarry Enterprise Fund. The transfer here, the bottom one here, that is what we transfer from this enterprise fund to the general operating fund of Oconee County, which is to offset the tax burden. That $500,000 for 2 years. So I took a chance in 2020 when we hit the 750. But that's also when the economy shut down and everybody went home and we started to see some sales increases. And again, it's a strange timing. Timing is everything, they say. We just got lucky. We were prepared to come back to council and say 750 may have been a bit much to chew, but in fact it wasn't. Because as we navigated perfecting the plant's performance and renegotiated the new blasting contracts and started doing the overburden removal in a separate way, we started to see our revenues increase, and we'll get around to the tonnages here in the annual report. But the net position, just a note, that is not cash on hand. That includes assets. So that is not a fund balance, so to speak. These are assets that are inclusive of the equipment. Any question on the Rock Quarry Enterprise Fund?
Is it safe to say that the rock quarry is now solid as a rock?
Thank you, Mr. Kane.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah. Now, it's also a blast. Okay, and that's all, folks, for our budget overview. Are there any questions just to wrap this portion of this up? Y'all want to take a 5-minute break? Anybody?
How close is the airport to becoming an enterprise fund?
If air traffic remains in the pattern it has for the last 24 to 28 months, 2 to 3 years, realistically.
That's one of my goals, is everything pays for itself. And I believe there's a few things we need to do to get to that point, Mr. Durham, but
There are.
that should be our goal, is get it to them.
There are. And we're not on break yet, are we, Jennifer? Okay. So I just do want to say this for the record. So when we're sitting on, and I'm jumping around for a second, but I have ADD. Welcome to my world. Where's the grant document? Y'all have the grant papers? So when y'all look at that grant paper and you see how many grants that we have, we do have a significant amount of grants from the South Carolina Aeronautics Commission and the FAA, all for the expansion and improvement of Oconee County Regional Airport. Oconee County still has to pay a match to those, and even a small percent of $6 million comes out of that same budget. So at some point, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we have to keep that in mind when we're looking at the airport budget all by itself. We're making contributions on a low percentage basis. Now, it's still, it's what, 3% max on some of these and 5% on others. So, I mean, it's pennies on dollars, but it's still a $6 million expenditure that we have to match. So in those cases and in these years where those grants are multiple year, I think we're working on 4 simultaneous airport improvement projects because the FAA codes them differently. And most of them, the FAA wants them to go because, their government year starts September 1. So if we go into their year, we're already into our next year. So it appears sometimes that we have expenditures related to operations when sometimes those expenditures are related to expansion and improvement.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing if you look at the airport as an expenditure item rather than a tool that you have in your belt, then it's the same thing with looking at parks. If a park's not making money, let's just do away with the park. So the park is an added benefit to our citizens, just like, just because you don't own an airplane, I mean, I've never flown in and out of the airport, but just because you don't own a plane doesn't mean it's not an added benefit to you. You may work for a company that flies in and out of there on a weekly basis. The amount of economic development that occurs for people flying in there to look at Oconee County, it's just a totally different world that a lot of us don't understand. And then you've got a lot of single engine airplanes that it's a great hobby that people live here because they're able to fly in and out or fly their little plane here or there. And again, there's a lot of things we do that don't make money, but it is a huge benefit to there. But it is one of those things that's getting close to making money. Parks, South Cove is a perfect example of a park that's almost paying for itself.
Last year it did.
But yeah, last year it did for the first time. But it doesn't mean that we should stop doing it because of the other benefits that it provides. It's not just, there's things that you do in life that don't make money. There's a lot of things you do. Most people's hobbies don't make money, they cost money, but you do it because it makes your life better, it makes memories, and that's the things that we have to look at and add to there, not just about making money. If all only thing to do in life is make money, then it's a boring life.
But I think we can do it.
I agree.
I think we need to raise the rent on the hangars and add hangars so we get more property taxes in. And I think we can self-fund it. I mean, I think it'd be.
Oh, it's close.
And I'd love to see it continue to expand because it is economic development. I mean, I worked for a company where we had 2 helicopters and 2 jets and flew out of GSP. And I mean, big companies do that.
Oh, yes.
Time's money. And
Oh,
so,
yes.
you get on a private plane or jet and you go somewhere, you go to one of your plants, you get a helicopter, you go to one of your plants.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, it's a huge economic benefit for us.
Do y'all want to take a break in between, or y'all want me to just keep talking really fast?
Is there a motion,
I would like to
motion to take a break?
So moved.
I've already took one.
All in favor?
Ms. Brock said You ready, George?
Motion to reconvene,
So moved. Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much again. Enjoyed the moment of break and the sweet donuts. Okay, so now we're going to move on to your initiatives from last year, what we did to accomplish those initiatives, and an overview of county government's accomplishments for the year 2021 before we move into our strategic planning session for moving forward. Jennifer. Perfect. So each of you on your desk has a 20-page report that looks like this. I'll list the page numbers as we're going through the slides. Obviously, I'm not going to read this entire report to you. This is an overview, but I do encourage you to take just a little bit of time when you can and have the opportunity, because this report is chock full of accomplishments, a lot of which was in the face of absolute impossible diversity. So our purpose, your county council and administration, we've had an annual strategic planning retreat now, I think going on 8 or 10 years. What this does, obviously, is gives us a baseline for where we are. Mr. Hart, I think you'll need to start on page 8 or 9. But you have the PowerPoint, do you not? Okay. Well, I don't want to get ahead of anybody. So what we do is establish our goals for the upcoming year, review our accomplishments for the previous year, and when we start talking about our strategic plan, this gives us, staff and administration, a guide as to how to formulate the upcoming year's budget to accomplish the matters that you prioritize as strategic to you. This year, 2021, brought a ton of challenges, as it did for everyone in the United States and the world. I'm super proud to say that this county and staff navigated through what seemed to be some impossible times. Our lowest point, we had 16% of staff out with COVID-related absences, and we still flourished. It wasn't always pretty, but we always did it, and we did it together. So with direction from you, this administration and staff will work diligently over the past year, and moving forward, we'll work diligently to complete your goals as you prioritize today in this strategic planning meeting. So council priorities for Tier 1 strategic initiatives for this past year was we had an overwhelming interest in increasing public safety, improve services through training, equipment, and program updates. And that one bullet just isn't enough to tell you what truly happened when it came to public safety in Oconee County. We had a record number of 911 calls. We had a record number of turnover in new staff. We had a record number here and a record number there. But what happened was we navigated every single time a challenge came. We responded to an emergency event or a typical normal event. It could be a 911 call where somebody had got in an ant bed in their yard. So our response times are lower. Our number of people to respond is higher. And the training opportunities that we are providing to staff to be able to multitask in their own positions, cross-training in certain divisions, paramedics, medics, firefighters, law enforcement officers becoming more than law enforcement officers. We expanded the ability to provide service under circumstances most of the time which were out of our control and with a limited number of staff. Utica revitalization. We had our second annual Utica Team Up to Clean Up. We partnered with Clemson University for the first Opportunity Zone proposal. We're in the midst of conducting the second charrette for the Opportunity Zone in conjunction with Blue Ridge Community Center. I was about to say Arts Council, but I'm talking too fast. Blue Ridge Community Center. And we took down one of the structures located as what is known as the compound. The expansion of county parks.
Ms. Brock,
Yes, sir.
touching on Utica real quick, because of the effort and the things that we're doing in Utica led to the sale of B&B, which was not identified as a compound, but had a lot of issues in that. And because the county's continued cleaning up and things going on led to the sale of that, and I'll let Paul kind of touch on that, but I think when we really look at areas, in our law enforcement meeting, Sheriff brought up, Utica had 1,481 calls. Now, that's, can be medical to crime, but if you follow Utica, you obviously understand what you got. And the next top one was the Pier, which is a student housing, largest student housing in the county, and it was like 481. So when you put those two together, you see why the emphasis became on Utica. And if it hadn't, we would still have, I see us having less calls coming in this year, but I just wanted to kind of talk about that, you know, the initiatives and the reason why it was a tier 1, and to me, it's the biggest tier 1 change I've ever seen happen since I've been on here.
Yeah, and thanks, Julian. I don't know if, Amanda, would you like to go through this, or should we talk about some of these as you go through?
The initiatives going forward?
Well, just as what's been accomplished last year.
Yes, we can talk about anything y'all like. This is your planning meeting. This is where everybody gets to share ideas. And so that those who don't understand have an opportunity to understand the communication shared by another. So absolutely, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. I appreciate Julian bringing that up. And, you know, I've been talking about Utica, and yes, it's in District 3, but it is the biggest problem, it's the biggest single law enforcement problem and community development problem in the county. It is a very densely populated area. There's a lot of good people that live in Utica, and there's a lot of folks with challenges, and it is vital that we continue to focus on that. And I'll mention that as we go forward, but we've made a lot of progress, and I want to thank you, Amanda, and the sheriff, and all the staff that's worked on it. Codes enforcement, we need more there as well. But we've made a lot of progress, and the tornado highlighted to a lot of the churches and nonprofits around. They're kind of forced to go in there, and they saw how bad it is. And so there's a continued effort with some of our churches as well that are just, hey, we're here for the long run. And so it's a huge blessing that not only the county's been focused on it, but the nonprofit and churches have been focused on it. And now the private sector, you know, as Joanne mentioned, B&B Trailer Park, which was a huge blighted mobile homes that had not been maintained. A lot of them should not have even been lived in. And, no investment was being made there. And now that property has been transferred over. It's been cleaned up for the most part. I mean, it's about probably 95% of the way cleaned up, which creates a new redevelopment opportunity. And there's many redevelopment opportunities in that area, but where right now it is, Utica as a whole is probably a cost center. I think it can be a profit center for the county. So between law enforcement, the judicial system costs, and public safety, and just the fact that people have lost their lives there and being robbed and property crimes and all that. If we can take that away and increase property values and safety and make it a more desirable place to live, I think it can really be an area that the county sees a net gain from, not only financially, but also just quality of life. And, there's some neighborhoods going up right around there that are going to help as well. So I'm really excited to see what happens over the next year and the next decade in Utica. And I thank you, council, for your support. It's been something that it's really torn me up over my term, and I appreciate y'all supporting it, and I appreciate your continued support financially even after I'm off of there, because this county's accomplished more in the past couple years in Utica than the prior probably 5. So I thank y'all so much. Thank you, Ms. Brown.
That's pretty touching. On a high note, the day that we got the road department equipment out at Pageant Street, I called Mr. Kane because typically I don't ever want to pull my road department guys off of a road job if it's a public safety or roadway issue. But when they called me that morning, they said, hey, we've got a crew that can go over there. I called Mr. Kane. I was like, I'm not sure where you are. I'm not sure what you're doing. But we're going to tear down the compound this morning. And it wasn't planned. Nobody was dressed for it. It was dirty outside. It was dry. It was hot. And all of a sudden, Mr. Kane pulls up, and he is so excited. And I hope you don't mind me telling this story, Mr. Kane, because this is truly what public service is about. He gets out of his truck, and he runs over, and I'm like, get in. And it felt just like when you're a little kid and somebody's like, do you want to go for a ride, or like first time doing anything? He hopped up in that whatever piece of equipment it's called. I'm sure Bo Whitman is not very happy with me right now. And lo and behold, took the first strike. So, Mr. Kane, good for you. Good for you. As we continue to look at ways to improve Utica, I think we're going to find, with the old Mohawk Mill being one of the last standing historic preservation mills in the county, that once we hit this weird equilibrium spot, it's going to be a sweet spot for us. It's where the community starts to maintain its own health and prosperity with continued contributions from churches, nonprofits, government, law enforcement, health officials, mental health officials. Someone, somewhere will become interested in that mill, and there will be a change in Utica. And I think that we can contribute a lot of the grit that we have applied in our years and trash picked up. Mr. Davis, once we did get the compound torn down, Mr. Davis and his son, I don't know how many tons, 174 tons at the last cleanup. I do want to schedule a cleanup here soon and get everybody that can come out to come. And we're looking for sponsorships too. Norm, if you could plug that for me. You're not plugging anything.
That mine is a plug.
Yeah, and I should mention too, Julian he's been a champion for Utica, and he's been out there every chance he can, even if I'm not there for a cleanup, if I'm not able to make it there. I know Julian's there, and he brings a bunch of guys out there and ladies to help clean up and bring their equipment out, and it's it's not just about District 3, it's about Oconee County, and y'all get that, and I'd love to see y'all out at the next cleanup. I don't know if it's been scheduled yet, but
No, it has not. Mr. Durham had come, this is maybe 3 months in your first term? Was it 3 months? We had come to our Utica group meeting, and I took him over to see the compound, and we rode through B&B. And as we were discussing the drug and crime, and a person clearly that was on drugs wandered out and literally almost walked into my car with Mr. Durham in the car with me. And I think you can talk about Utica, and these are your words I'm using, I hope you don't mind. You can say what you want about Utica. You can say all these things, you can put it in words, you can describe it. But it's not something that's describable until you're there. There's so much opportunity, there's so much potential, and it's there, you can see it. But until you actually have a moment to experience what the lifestyle of Utica is truly like and what they're made of, they're strong and crazy independent, strong people. And I think a flashlight to shine the way is exactly what the county has been able to provide. They did a lot of good.
It's sort of off to the side, but I surveyed a piece of property that was given to Patsy.
Yes, sir.
To build, I guess, a kitchen or what she's gonna do to serve the people there. And also, speaking of Utica, and people may not know this, but some of the best athletes that ever walked through Seneca High School came from Utica. Now, not me, I'm talking about
let me mention too, and I know about that, Mr. Hart, about what you did out there. Mr. Hart did that survey free of charge. I think found an attorney, a law firm, to do the closing free of charge as well. So thank you for your contribution over there, Mr. Hart. It is
What a
appreciated.
coincidence.
What's that?
What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Moving on to Tier 2 strategic initiatives. These were identified by at least 2 council members during the strategic retreat of 2021. Oconee County Regional Airport improvements. We have completed the West Apron expansion. We're this close to signing our closeout document. That's really, really close for those of you who can't see that far. We have done asphalt repairs on the runway. We did get an emergency grant from Aeronautics Commission of South Carolina. Typically, you're not able to apply for and receive any sort of funding when you're in the middle of a funding cycle from another agency related to the same thing. But because of the condition of the asphalt on the runway, we were able to get that 95.5 match from South Carolina Aeronautics. And we've done some serious improvements to the entrance terminal. It's really interesting that most people think about the airport. The visual that you get is from where? The runway. That side of the building's beautiful. That side of the entry's beautiful. You drive in a car, you think you might be lost. So we've done some significant improvement if you're out that way. 365 Airport Road. Highway safety traffic alleviation. We are continuing to focus efforts on highway safety. Sheriff's Office, I hate that the sheriff had to leave earlier. We'll get around to their slides shortly, but there is a increased attention to speed and manner of driving in Oconee County, working closely with the South Carolina Highway Patrol on that as well. And we are still working on attending regional planning meetings. Mr. Hart, just a few minutes ago, brought up one regarding the 24 road improvements for March 3rd. And of course, you know, the paving contracts, the striping contracts for county roads as well. So those safety matters don't necessarily touch in the alleviation of traffic. That's something that is a big picture. That's a long game. Traffic alleviation in this county is going to be a long game. A lot of the traffic issues that we face in this county, Mr. Elliott highlighted on earlier, are state roads. We can keep our communication open. We can make our priority list, which I think is an excellent idea to bring back to transportation. Those things are long games. It's not something we would have been able to fix in 1 year and bring back those results to you. Not sustainable results anyway. Tier 3 strategic initiatives. So on your, hold on, I'm way behind on my own page. So if in your written long reports, your tier 3s are on page 10 and 11. I told you I would tell you where on your report they were, and I'm sorry I have not. So for the Greenway, recently council approved the $300,000 potential match for engineering and planning of a Greenway trail system, partnering with the city of Clemson, Clemson University. Bounty Land Fire Substation, we hope to have a groundbreaking event on March 11th at 10:30 in the morning. We'll be sending invites out to that either later today or in the morning. As you all know, the previous property for Bounty Land Fire Substation construction was behind the former Hamilton Career Center on South Cove Road. And we, as a group and council, directed me to find an alternative location for that substation that would have less impact on traffic. And we were able to work with the Maranatha Church on Kiwi School Road for that. The Farm Center, Oconee County, recently approved a $30,000 in-kind match grant to the Farm Center. We sponsored several music shows over the course of the summer last year and continue to work with the Farm Center and its board for the expansion of agricultural resources in Oconee County. Wastewater treatment expansion. We could have a complete separate meeting on this. So I think the most interest every person in this room has, if they had one thing to be interested in over the past year, has been the wastewater system, because it's been on the front page, it's been on our minds, it's been on television, it's been an issue for Oconee County citizens. We have worked diligently with the sewer authority. Mr. Hart and I finally were able to work with the authority to get the last 5 of the easements required for us to move to the permitting phase for Sewer South. I am happy to say that it looks like we might be able to put those documents, and when I say we, I mean our partnership with the sewer authority. It's not a county grant, it's a sewer authority grant. We may be able to get that bid out by summertime this year. We have recently conducted, I know, Mr. Hart, I kind of want to dance too.
No, I don't want to dance. I'm going to cry because they told me they was going to do it by the end of March.
I'm just basing this on experience, not anybody's
Well,
okay.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm with
Sorry.
you, but the timeline they gave me was March.
Right. So I'm just going to say though, you know, when I moved here I heard the words over and over and over again. You'll never get sewer to 85. You'll never get sewer to 85. You'll never get sewer to 85. Now, we might be taking this big of a step, and we might be doing this, but we are actually going to one day get sewer to 85. I promise. We're getting sewer to 85.
Let me throw this in. One day last week, they had trucks at the end of Route 11, and they had such and such boring. I got on 85, start towards Fairplay, and on the right-hand shoulder, they had a drill rig set up and had a cleared out spot, and they were drilling, I guess, to tell what type of rock they were gonna hit or what. I don't know exactly what the boring was for, but they were boring. That was last week.
Okay, that means they're underway with geotech. That's good. That's good. And one small step is one small step. A win is a win. So simultaneously, council approved the Basin 4 wastewater basin study for the geographical area located in and around and north of Exit 4. Once we break ground in the Sewer Authority's partnership on the grant to get to 1 and 2, we'll bring back to council strategic initiatives for us moving forward with engineering and permitting to move up to Exit 4. And then we need to start considering hooking those two basins together to have one cohesive, larger unit basin there. Roadway infrastructure, again, I mentioned this earlier. We have 3 different funding mechanisms for Oconee County roadways and maintenance, 2 of which are designated mills. The other is through the general fund of government. We also have monies that come to us from the state level or from our C Fund committee. That committee typically meets once a month. They were supposed to meet yesterday, but not sure why that meeting was canceled. Broadband expansion, as you all know, I'm going to say it wrong, NFTA?
MTIA?
Same thing. NTIA. I know too many acronyms. Has approved the transfer agreement, and the investments in broadband connectivity in Oconee County are anticipated to be in the millions within just a short few years. Stormwater management personnel / engineer. As you all know, we went 9 months without a planning director here in Oconee County, and we have one. His name is James Coley. I hope all of you have had a moment to speak with him and meet him. But I've asked James, because of his considerable background in infrastructure and stormwater management, to work with Kyle Reed at the road department so that we can put 2 heads together for one solution. And we are working on doing that job description now, to hoping that position will be posted by the end of the budget year.
But Amanda, as a follow-up to that, I'd like to see the planning commission start working on a stormwater ordinance so that we'll have some teeth in managing the stormwater going forward. Because that's been a huge problem. I get calls just like Matt does about the roads, but I also get calls every time we have 5 inches of rain, people calling up this construction site.
Right. So we'll talk about that in just a minute, if you don't mind, when we get to the strategic plan initiatives, because there are some things that we can and can't do. Obviously, we can talk to the state, we can talk to DHEC, but if they're not in violation of a DHEC regulation, sometimes it's hard for us to enforce a more localized law, even with teeth. Alternative solid waste opportunities. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, we've handled double the amount of solid waste in the past 2 years than we ever have. We hit another record this year. With the closing of the Pendleton Transfer Station and the Pickens landfill, our solid waste division is not able to look at alternative anything. They are looking at survival. I would love to fluff you and say we've looked into this and looked into that. The one thing we have done, we suspended plastics recycling at the height of the pandemic because all markets were shut down and we don't have a storage facility, and the UVA rays and the UVB rays damage certain quality of HDPE and LDPE plastics, which is milk jugs and typical containers. This is like a #1 plastic. So we suspended that for a period of time. Since we've taken the plastics recycling back, though, we have hit about $200,000 in revenue, which is really surprising to me considering the rest of the economy when the dry resin market is so much stronger than the recycling market is. So that concludes the council initiatives for this. Is there any discussion y'all like to talk before we get into the general government annual review? And I can go through that as quickly or slowly as you'd like.
Have we received any updates? Have any of y'all, I can't think of his name, Hinton, or anybody at Blue Ridge about where they're working in the county?
Yeah, they actually have a map on their,
Upcountry fiber.
on their site to show where they're putting on, because it's just kind of spaced out. I mean, there's some stuff that came on in Long Creek, there's some stuff that came on, Chickasaw Point. I mean, they lit that whole area up, and pretty much anybody around there.
If they have a bunch of people there that they could throw a whole bunch of wire at one time, that's what they do.
Yeah, so, and they have had connections in there, so they're headed in the right, there's more people that's got lit up. I shouldn't say the word lit up, but that's what they say too, when they turn them on. That's probably even worse, but lit up, turn on, yeah. But, that if they're headed into that route, it's easier to hook up, that's, you know, it's going where it needs to go, and they're still just into the phase of it, but it's, my area and your area, same way. I got it sitting out in front of my house and I can't get to it. So, they do have a lot of effort going into place, and if you go on that upcountry, and get that filled out to show the need for that area, it helps, so.
So they've not been able to tap into the county fiber network until recently, right, since that transfer's been complete, or have they been able to do that all along?
You talking about upcountry themselves?
Yes.
Well, no, I mean, upcountry didn't exist here till.
No, I'm talking about the network that we
Focus.
transferred, yes. So,
No, I
I'm
mean,
assuming they've
One
not-
had a lot of people on certain subdivisions.
yeah, I'm just saying this new enterprise, they've not been able to use it until now that the transfer is complete, is that correct?
I believe they were making upgrades within the terms of their agreement with One Town.
Yeah, upcountry didn't exist.
I don't know how open or closed that access or those terms were. We weren't privy to their, as a private business to private business communication. But I think with council's intent, if I remember correctly, Mr. Root, speak up if I'm wrong, that the intent was if that was to go forward, that they would have access as if they were.
Whatever it is, it's not enough yet. Honestly.
So I think we've been approved, less than a month?
Less than a month.
So,
They haven't finalized their deal with One Town yet.
Correct.
They haven't closed on
but I anticipate once all the documents are signed, the i's dotted, t's crossed, seals pressed in, clocked into wherever they go to, and checks written, it'll probably take off so I would be hesitant to make an incredible investment, speedy, incredible investment if I didn't have all the documents in place to do so.
And there's gonna be a ton of through the state, I guess that was their ARPA direct, ARPA 2 billion. I think, or I don't remember which tranche this is, but I think it's 400 million that they're putting into broadband throughout the state. And then there's direct federal grant programs so that the money's gonna be there. Unfortunately, I think it's gonna come down to how expensive the components are, as we see
And the
everybody's
production of
trying to
fiber
build out
itself.
fiber right now.
Right. The production of fiber itself.
Yeah.
Yes. So council initiatives have been met as best as we possibly could, most of which, as you all see, I hope exceeded your expectations in delivery of service. The only one I feel like we truly fell short on is the alternative options for solid waste. And as I said, it was all we could do to get through this year. We did an 88 acre expansion. We were in violation of DHEC several times over the summer with the amount of debris that we were taking at one time without the ability to cover. Part of that was staffing shortages. Part of that was just the sheer amount of waste that's still coming in from the tornado. It's unbelievable, the residual amount of waste that's coming in. Mr. Hart, I think you had a friend or family member that even less than 2 months ago still have some tornado waste. And a lot of this is because insurance companies didn't step up and pay as quickly. We do have some... Or at all, yes. We do have a lot of people who still haven't had any kind of settlement, and the tipping fees for a structure is expensive. So we've been able to work within the means and the funding we have remaining left from the tornado relief money so that we can at least accommodate most of those citizens who cannot pay for that disposal. But we don't have a means. We didn't have a means in the past year for us to look at alternative solid waste options. And I'd like to apologize for one, but I also would like to congratulate the staff when you see we get to the solid waste division on what they were able to do with such limited resources and the absolute amount of what has to be burnout from staff working overtime to make up for these shortages. Okay, so on county side, Oconee County continues to realize the impacts of COVID as we entered the state of emergency. We have resumed normal operations, but it doesn't mean there isn't a residual effect. It is much like throwing a rock in a pond. That rock may go to the bottom of the pond, but you're still going to get a ripple for a considerable period of time afterward. One of the things that we did in the very beginning when we started realizing we had staff, I told y'all about that window of staff 5 years and under. So your accumulation of available time to take off, or PTO, is slow building when you first come to Oconee County. In your first year, you get 5 days. And you can wipe out 5 days of COVID when there's a 14-day required quarantine pretty quickly. So I sent a call to the altar email out to staff and said, hey, this is us. This is who we are, and this is us. This is our own people having to go without pay. And if you go without pay more than 30 days, our policy says that you have to pay your own premium on health insurance. So not only would they have to go without pay, their insurance premiums would skyrocket. So what we did was establish a COVID sick bank. And this is by donation only, voluntary. If I sent the email out, I started the bank with 200 hours of my own personal time. By the end of the day, we had 4,000 hours. 4,000 hours donated. People giving up their time that they had earned to cover for others. That is at zero cost to taxpayers. That is so no employee had to go without pay facing circumstances under COVID. Council also initiated the premium pay, back pay for essential workers. That was in December. We did have second reading the other night. We do not have a date for distribution for that money, but the day that we get the notification of distribution, y'all are probably gonna see a lot of hats flying in the air because our staff is ecstatic over that. This is the fourth year council has invested in its employees. The last time that we had a fourth consecutive year wage increase was in the early 2000s. And then all wage increases stopped or became so erratic that you just couldn't depend on them. This helps us retain and recruit employees. Redistricting. Mr. Root and staff have worked diligently holding public meetings, working with council members, GIS department. You all have contributed so much of your own time and energy for the two districts that are most impacted by this. Last September, Auditor Christy Huber came in front of you and said a recommended lowering of the mill, which is a reduction in taxes. This did come out of the debt service fund. You saw that earlier on the financial PowerPoint that we went over. So we went from 227 to 226. ARPA money comes as designated from the federal government. ARPA is the American Rescue Recovery Act. We have distributed funding to the municipalities for the critical infrastructure repairs required by the citizens in and outside of those municipalities. In other news, 1.4 million hits on our website. That's up double from 3 years ago. 1.4 million hits in a county of 80,000. Our online form submittals and inquiries has quadrupled, which means people don't have to come here. People don't have to feel frustrated. People don't have to wait in line. Our telephone system, and you'll see this in our IT part, in our conversion, our telephone system can now track numbers that are transferred or numbers that are direct calls. Our transferred numbers, because people understand us better, because our language is better, our communication is better, the calls coming in are hitting their designated office. 5 years ago, my phone rang off the hook. I need to talk to somebody here, or I need to talk to somebody there. Our website has helped clear or navigate people to the correct place so that our communication and our interactions with the customers is more pleasant for the customer. Experience Oconee had an 86,000 hit website this year. That's PRT. 86,000 for 3 county parks. That's unheard of. Our revenues have increased for a tax. Law enforcement and public safety. I hate the sheriff had to leave again. He said he had a previous engagement. This will start on page 14 on your long report. So emergency services, as you all know, we received a little over $900,000 for the air packs from the Assistance to Firefighters grant. Emergency services, again, has responded to more than 1,300 calls this year. We'll get into that with the 911 calls here because those are dispatched out only to emergency services and sheriff. Prisma Health is on a separate, City of Seneca is separate. The 911 communications, this is the first time this has ever happened. Captain Tilson's very happy about this. 90% of the calls that came in the last calendar year as a 911 call were answered in less than 10 seconds. 90%. Last year, the sheriff and I came to you during budget season and said, hey, we think we need some more people in communication. We knew that they had been understaffed, but we hadn't done a staffing study. And we did an evaluation of that department, much to the sheriff's credit. We got an additional 2 dispatchers, which means we can keep dispatchers on shift and have swing part-time employees come in to cover the heavier call times. And our increased technology has allowed us to track call times, so we're increasing efficiencies. Instead of having 3 people sit there or 4 people sit there and have a fluctuating heavy call time, we've been able to track those call times and bring in key personnel during the heaviest and highest volume of call time, which results in lower salary, lower benefits paid. Part-time employees are vital to us. They don't want to work full-time. Part-time employees love working their 24 hours or 28 hours and going home, but they still want something to do and they want to be able to contribute. 97% of calls received in the 911 Communication Center last year were answered in 20 seconds or less. Oconee County Animal Control, this is also page 15, 30% improvement in 1 year. We took in 2,089 animals in 2021. 935 were adopted, 690 were transferred. This is a 30% improvement over the previous year. I still hate the sheriff's not here. So last year, you all know we did a voluntary assessment of the animal shelter and had significant improvements cited for us to, opportunities, we call them opportunities, cited for us to make improvements. And it is amazing what the staff and the command staff has been able to do at the shelter. Actually, the sheriff and I were discussing the Humane Society may come up soon with a request for the ability to build a veterinary structure on site at the Humane Society Animal Control Facility so that they may hire a veterinarian to do spay and neuters on site, which will significantly decrease the cost of medical services. That 30% improvement was in 1 year. Just want y'all to think about that for 1 second. Most places improve 2, 3, 5% at a time. 10% here, there. 30 is significant and recognizable. Continuing on with law enforcement and public safety, the Sheriff's Office and Emergency Services. Oh wait, I'm on the wrong slide. Okay, law enforcement and public safety, slide 2. So again, we're talking about highway safety, traffic alleviation, 2,800 warning tickets and 2,500 traffic citations were noted last year in an effort to keep our highways safer for our drivers. The Sheriff's Office has reestablished the DARE program and has gone throughout the school district. The cost per child is only $10 and they're reaching every single 5th grader in attendance in a public school in Oconee County. Out of the 1,700 arrests made last year, 1% resulted, 1.3% resulted in the use of force. This is 16% below the national average. All units within the Sheriff's Office have exceeded their expectations within their rank and order in the past year. And this is the first time that has happened in the past 3 years. In public works, the road department continues to work for tornado disaster cleanup. As you all know, we got the $4.3 million for the stream and waterway mitigation grant from the U.S. Forest Service 16 months ago now, 17 months ago. We are wrapping that up and reimbursements are rolling in. The road department has also worked on the demolition of the Westminster Magistrate parking lot, the bridge replacement at Cherokee Lake, 660 miles of county roads maintained. Road department, solid waste, airport, rock quarry, actually everybody. I should just say everybody. We have now started working in each other's areas. The road department's always helped solid waste has always helped parks. But now we're starting to actually physically go to other places and work in those departments. And I'd really like to give a shout out to the road department and solid waste because they were relocating the log. It's the tipping area at the landfill. And we had a couple of instances, despite it being approved, evaluated. I don't know how this happens, but people drive into the hole. They back up too far, essentially. So within our own staff, they came up with a mechanism for us to relocate that to increase visibility. I think you and Swain were talking about a truck that went off or a trailer that went off. I don't know how that happens, but in our own staff, they've come up with a better and safer way, because signs don't work, to work together for the safety of the citizens using the landfill. Okay, solid waste. So our landfill, as I stated earlier, has expansion permit. Now this is upwards and outwards, so I don't want y'all to think we have an 88-acre footprint. Landfills go in quads, so you'll build up and then out and then level. And then you'll move to your next one, build up and out and level. So the 88 is a cubical acreage, I should say. We increased the tonnage limit. As I said, we were in violation of DHEC a couple of times during the tornado debris debacles, what we called it, for a month, because we just couldn't get enough ground to cover. Every single day before sunset, we expanded our hours, we accepted more waste. But now we do have the tonnage limit increased to almost 90,000 tons, and that does increase the life of the landfill by 75 years. So we're going to talk for the past 2 years, just real quickly. The transfer station is your typical commercial or household waste, MSW. You'll see our increases here range from 12. Now yard waste has gone down because we're putting it in the landfill because we don't have anywhere to put it. But if you look at this C&D, 33%, and that's just in 2 years. So when I said that we didn't have an opportunity to look for alternatives for solid waste, that's why. You're looking at 30% in our C&D recycled. We have a asphalt and brick and concrete recycling that we're working on still, but it's working pretty well. It's working pretty well. Rock Quarry, we went over their revenues earlier and the transfer back to the general fund. I don't know who asked about the number of tons, but that tons was 611 and this 7.15 million in revenue. Rock Quarry turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It's always a blessing, but it turned out to be a weird blessing in disguise shortly after the tornado because of so much damage being done on such slope surfaces. Rock was used to stabilize everything. It was strange because we had this crazy uptick and we knew that people were building and rebuilding, but when we realized it was for stabilization of not flat surfaces, that's when we started selling the Class B at a lower rate so that those impacted, the stream bed mitigations, those impacted could pay less because the quality of rock didn't matter. It was the foundational support that it provided that did. And this year again, record sales. I don't know how many records we broke. I know that you can only break one record one time, but it seemed like it was going on and on and on. You break a record for the third week in June. 2 weeks later, you'd break a record. 3 weeks later, you'd break a record. And I want to knock on wood, for wood. We still haven't broken a bone. And all the things that we've done, and all of that public safety, solid waste, road department, and rock quarry, we've done it safely.
The communication's been better out to the drivers
The text.
to keep them from spending the diesel getting there. So that, huge props for that.
Yes.
The machine is working 1,000 times better than it was. It's still not perfect, but it's
so close.
It's getting there.
It's so close.
So the quality of the rock seems to be better.
So just on the record, speaking of quality of rock, we will be doing an overburden scrape starting next week. So there will be some Class B going out, which is the Tier 2. It looks dirty. It is a little bit sandy. If it's just pea gravel or 57s, if it rains, it will turn right back to white granite. It is way not it's not cost efficient for us to dig down to where there's no sand. So we will be running some Class Bs next week. So internally, finance for the 13th consecutive year. 13, go. Received the Certified Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. During the middle of this year, our Finance and Human Resource offices decided to do some research. They were bored, I guess. Y'all weren't bored, were you? On a better payroll modeling software and HR software. We had some hiccups with our previous software. As you know, every 5 or 6 years, we are challenged with either upgrades that are way more expensive than we anticipated or a limitation within that software that we did not anticipate. Because we are self-funded in our insurance, we have to have a very specific written software for us. In the middle of the year, Finance and HR found a cheaper, better software and did a conversion with no hiccups. No hiccups. We've increased compliance to the local accommodations tax. This is in partnership with Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. This is on page 17, Mr. Hart. So we've had a 40% increase in A-tax in 2020, 76% increase in 2021. I'm going to go back 3 years and talk about an initiative, or 4 years. An initiative put forth by council was to diversify our revenue stream. We did. That's a diversified revenue stream. Your A-tax is a diversified revenue stream. And it's not locals that pay that A-tax, typically, because it's an accommodations tax. I mean, 1-2 nights maybe. I've rented an Airbnb here in Oconee County when I had a lot of friends coming in. It was just more than my house would hold. But those are people that come here and stay here. It's the heads and beds tax, as Ken Sloan says, and he's much better at talking about the benefits of these. But that's a 76% increase. 76% increase in revenue in one revenue stream. Procurement has forever been the management arm of anything purchased, bought, sold, bid upon, looked at, or traded for Oconee County, and they keep us all in line in doing so. And we have 2 excellent employees in that department who work with other departments, every other department, who has a replacement on the capital replacement plan in Oconee County. And that ranges from elected officials to the guys at the motor pool who, when we start to spec a piece of equipment, understand the future needs and maintenance requirements of such. She is the round table of everything happening in there. And this year we got new Xerox machines, which Mr. Hart, they are on a lease. You asked that earlier. Our copy machines are on a lease, but our lease does give us the option to upgrade once you get so many number of copies or X number of hours on them. And for her to be able to do that this year with us physically moving everything around and new voting machines out in the hallway, I'm surprised that she's been able to do that without drinking at work. Kidding. Kidding. She does drink at work. I'm joking there too.
Water.
Lots and lots of water. So delinquent tax, information technology, these 2 things can get overlooked sometimes. But delinquent tax, we sat down and went through the records. This year we had 250 bidders, and again we held it at the Walhalla Performing Arts Center. Second year in a row because of COVID. 1, the auctioneers love it because the floor is sloped. They can see the bids so much easier. 2, we have more people coming to delinquent tax sale than we ever have before, and council chambers simply just isn't adequate for that to take place in here any longer. So our total collection for delinquent tax was $2.6 million. And that's nothing to celebrate, really. The revenue, and that we're collecting taxes, and that's our objective, I get. But part of the delinquent tax side is very sad. When you see people that come here with family property that can't afford to lose that. I actually took 3 months or so and flipped through and had Quarry help me understand these taxes, the properties themselves, and the sale. This is the lowest year of owner-occupied delinquent tax sale ever. These are investors. A lot of these are investors now. We still have 2 primary communities, I'm not going to say on the record, who have large numbers of lots. And we realized that it wasn't the taxes that the previous owners were so adamantly against paying. It was the homeowner fees in certain communities. So we have to take those into perspective. But I do want to say that we have had the second lowest number of owner-occupied transfers. And I say the second lowest because this year is still open, and we won't know that until this tax year closes out, until that redemption period closes.
Yeah, because I noticed there had to be a decrease because that charity that Wayne started, there seems to be a lot less requests
Yes,
for that.
yes.
So, and the people who manage it's kind of a little bit, but
It's a good thing.
yeah, but maybe it's just all the extra help people's got in the past year or two and other money. I don't know.
I hope that's the case. We do see a lot of investments at delinquent tax sale. And honestly, if you going back to our interest income on our own county money, you can earn more money purchasing a delinquent tax parcel that even gets redeemed than you can by investing it for 1 year. I mean, even for the investors, there's a turnaround there. Information technology, again, 1.4 million hits on our website. We've replaced our wireless network with new equipment. We have new wired network equipment. We have the capital IT equipment replacement program within the general fund budget. Everybody remembers Cyber Day. I remember Cyber Day. You remember Cyber Day. Everything we do is for prevention. Everything we do. Prevention and security on the inside. Everything we do on the outside is for customer service. So there's really only 2 functions there. Make sure everything works perfectly for all of us inside, which it doesn't, because that's normal. And then make sure everything is working for our customers on the outside. Another thing we're doing, and this is just a cost-effective measure, is we're looking to change our phone service from flow route, or from Windstream to flow route. Right now we have a foot in both of those, so we won't have a reduction in expenditures for that this year, but we're hoping to have a reduction in expenditures next year as we take our foot out of the Windstream model and into the flow right model. Growth and development. I included economic development in this because in your packet, on the back of your packet, yes, is the annual Economic Alliance report. The annual meeting was postponed a few weeks ago after Ms. Casiano announced her upcoming resignation, and I don't want to steal the Alliance's thunder. Their annual meeting is on the 31st, and you're all invited to attend. You should have an email about that. But I do just want to make a couple of highlights there that we have had in 1 year, $51.5 million in capital investment, 82 jobs created, 64 inquiries, 20 existing industry visits from our staff, and 45 consultant interactions. And those numbers may or may not seem significant to you, which is why I included this report in here for you. The percentage of increase in economic development activity in Oconee County is at a minimum of 15 and a maximum of 26. The interest in Oconee County as the leisure residential interest rise, so did the business interest. And that interest will continue. Planning. As stated earlier, we went 9 months without a planning director. He's here. He had quite a bit of adjustment and some backlog of files. Vivian rode that ship like a master. She has been an absolute asset to James. The 2-person department has reviewed plans for 825 lots in 1 year. And they've interacted with thousands of citizens and could be future citizens, developers, business, regarding land use, zoning, the water issues, stormwater. Because we don't have a stormwater division, 90% of the calls come through the planning department anyway. Planning and building codes have worked side by side. The partnership is solidifying there. Code enforcement is still have a backlog. I have posted and we have interviewed for a temporary position for code enforcement because we realized that we were being a detriment to the sheriff's office. When our code enforcement officer has to go on site for a property violation complaint that does not appear to be safe, his first call is to the sheriff's office. That takes an officer off of the road. When I realized that we were putting the sheriff's office behind the 8 ball, so to speak, when it came to public safety, I temporarily, in January of this year, posted a second code enforcement officer position that has not been filled, but it will be one that I'm going to ask for in the upcoming budget, so that we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul to deal with matters. Some of the code enforcement issues that we have received in the past couple of days are simply a matter of people not having the ability to get rid of what their neighbors are complaining about. There may be furniture in the front yard or a broken camper in the side yard. As new construction continues to pop up in places that haven't been disturbed, and I don't mean new construction disturbing, but something has been one way for 10 years and all of a sudden we've got someone that bought the 10 acres across the street. What was once invisible to most of the people is now the only thing that's visible to the newcomer. So a lot of our complaints are new residences coming in. And a lot of the people I went out Friday on the code call, and they're wonderful, nice people. They just don't have the means to move. You have to have equipment to do some of these things. The broken down camper. So that second code enforcement officer, hopefully, will be able to alleviate the need for us to rely on the sheriff's office and take someone out of the public safety sector so that we can have a safety in numbers philosophical visits for the code enforcement. In building codes, another record broken. 3,643 permit applications, 2,657 permits. Revenue is 1.6. Now remember, your revenue is on the scale of the value of the property being constructed. So if I walk in and want to build a $20,000 house, my fee is not the same as someone that walks in and wants to build a $1 million house. That scale is reflective of the value of the construction itself. Our GIS department, I hate that Lisa's not, she's actually on vacation today. She assigned 1,072 new addresses. Now remember our census growth said we weren't growing by number of people? Well, those addresses tell you we are because those are residents. And they may not live here to be residents, but those addresses are telling you that our growth is a little more than what our population numbers may reflect. 33 private roads are added to the network. Clerk of court. Lisa's done some amazing things. So during this time that we had the opportunity to not have jurors and judges and jury calls when the courts were shut down, there were a lot of upgrades, both physically in the courtrooms and the building itself, as well as the Johnson Controls upgrade. They did a digital court reporting system, which is really cool. Same as our system here. I didn't realize how antiquated the previous system was. The jury information line, again, that open means of communication to alleviate questions or inconsistencies in information, and the revision of the emergency action plan. Probate has seen 100 cases per month, which is a little higher than years past. I think it's 8% higher. And the communication with the public has changed since we have had a change of personnel and there being a change in priority for that office. The Westminster Magistrate broke ground on August. We are on track to be complete. Hopefully by the end of March, the paving and some exterior work has to be completed before we get our CO. But I'd like to say we're on time and on budget. Where everything else has gone up, the increases, records here, records there, the building is on time and it's going to be on budget. That is a testament. And in summary, y'all tired of hearing me talk? 2 years have been tough. Hopefully we're on the upside of it. None of us seem to be too horribly wounded that they're not willing to come back and fight again. There's a lot of things I can say about this county, a lot. Mr. Kane, you teared up earlier. I'm not typically one to tear up, but we have a team here and they do what it takes. And I'm so glad that y'all do what it takes to let them do that. Thank you. Questions? Comments?
So we're gonna go to strategic goals now?
We are.
Okay. we kind of go in order of the districts, so I'll start. I think we've talked about everything that we got on there, but, the roads, we need to have better communication with our citizens about what's local and what's state. And also put emphasis on maintaining the county roads. Second item I have is, just solid waste station upgrades. Focus on the solid waste problem that we have and improve, the system, the stations where we can. The third point I had was going back to the airport, try to make the airport, by adding additional hangars and also raising the rent. Existing hangars and new hangars that we build. Need to slow down?
Yes. I have a feeling y'all are probably gonna hit some of these same things, so we're gonna tick mark them.
Missions, of course, try and extend sewer to exit 4 area. And broadband, continue to move our country. Encourage them to lay out as fast as they can, the broadband, especially the rural areas. I think, Matt, you'll make a point that, or Glenn, you'll make a point that you're focusing on the population, but, it's the rural areas that really suffered during COVID with the kids that couldn't go out on the internet and do their homework. Last but not least is Utica. Continue to focus on Utica.
I'm gonna need to move that.
So that's what I got. So next your list.
So last year when we came into this meeting, I was new to it, kind of didn't know what really to expect. We all kind of laid out a wish list that grew government, myself included in that, and not really interested in doing that, but I am interested in providing high quality services. And there's some services that I think we could provide that would not, that is needed. As we go through and prep it, I like for us to justify each of the costs in this upcoming budget coming up, especially in the increases. We could be able to see what the need is and what the return of investment is on that increase. But going to some of the items, Ms. Edward, you said solid waste. One thing that we need to address is brown goods bins. We need them at the convenience centers. We want to keep the county
blue is Mr. Elliott.
clean. We need to make it available for citizens to dispose of those items. I said brown goods.
Thank you.
Solid waste. See here. So, like I said, I'm not interested in growing the government, but I am interested in seeing the pay continue to become competitive to recruit talent. We need to maintain, at the very minimum, cost of living is rising. We spend so much money on just stuff and studies. I see no reason with the rate of, growth we've been taking in to not be able to meet the sheriff's needs that he's requesting for the sheriff's department and deputies. You look at it, Chick-fil-A's hiring for $19 an hour, so a 16-year-old can work a drive-through at Chick-fil-A and make more than a man and woman is required to wear a bulletproof vest to work. We need to do better than that. They deserve better. We should make that a priority. To at least meet his requests, have not exceeded. And also county roads and state roads. So like I said, I get a lot of complaints about roads. Some are county, the majority of them are state. So as we talked about educating the folks, and I try to point them in the right direction, but I like the idea that we talked about earlier, of let's coming up with a high need list for state roads that we can then impress upon a state delegation who Mr. Kane says have a lot of power in Columbia. And I think that's it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to break my rule.
Oh, broadband too. I want to
Okay.
emphasize broadband, what you said. I want to emphasize some of what you said. Broadband, I don't know what else we can do, but if we can do it, let's do it to help expedite it. And I'm with everybody else too, the team on Utica. Let's continue to help.
Glenn needs to go next, so I'm gonna put Glenn in front of you. That's okay.
May I interrupt 1 second? I'm so sorry. Mr. Elliott, I did not get the first thing you said about solid waste.
Solid waste upgrades.
Upgrades to the solid
Okay.
waste station.
Okay.
And it would keep in point system for our priority, also sewer to exit 4. Obviously, that's a priority too. I think we all share.
Keeping sewer
Did you take a break,
priority.
man?
I've gotta go make a telephone call. I'm supposed to meet somebody at 12 o'clock.
I talk too much.
Give mine and then step outside. If you wanna title mine, you can just put fair play. Cause the majority of what I have is in fair play. Exit 4, you can add me to that.
I need to make you a different color so when we do the sheets, I'll remember. All right.
Even on that exit 4, I'd like to see us start, for service lines, getting a survey and engineering done to tie into the main line. We need to do that for exit 4 and all the people in the area of Fairplay. And I said, you could title it Fairplay. I think the Fairplay School needs to be demolished. We got the money to do it with, and I know that you're working with the school department, and I think it's high time, because in October 2018, we got an appraisal for the abatement of the asbestos. I have it in my iPad right now. I brought it in case somebody doubted that date. So that has been roughly going on 3.5 years that we've been talking about that. There's one more thing that we need to do, and I know that you are aware of this too. The road and bridge department needs to finish the road down at Golden Corner and make it available, because we've got people now asking about that property down there. And you're aware of one particular situation, I know, and I think that we need to add that to the roads. That road needs to be finished so we can show that property to potential customers that are in the process of wanting to buy enough property to build a 50,000 square foot building with plans to build a second one after a year or two in business. And that's my priorities.
To go along with the road though, well, yes, the road at Golden Corner, and I do know, and we both know about the property. We need a mass grading down there, I think. Nobody asked me that. I'm sorry, Mr. Elliott.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're.
Sorry.
You already.
I talked for 2 hours and I won't let y'all get a sentence out. All right, let's see.
Okay.
Can I put these
You
here?
know, number one thing for me remains to be Utica. And I think that that's currently a cost center, and it can become a profit center for the county. And also, just, we owe it to the people who live there and who are doing the right thing to make sure they're in a safe community and that their property values aren't being hurt by a neighbor, and that it's a safe place to be. And I think along with Utica, I agree with you, Amanda, as I pushed for last year. I think we need a second code enforcement officer. We have a huge backlog now, so I guess my crystal ball was right. I think we need to continue. We have a serious sewer problem in this county. I'm not suggesting that Oconee County pay for sewer, get into the sewer business. We don't want to be in the sewer business. We're in the economic development business, but we cannot afford the lack of sewer infrastructure in this county that is currently being driven by some infighting among our municipalities. I like all of our municipalities. I'm friends with everybody there. I don't know if they think we're friends with them, but I've heard it. I read about it in the newspaper or see it on the website, and there's discussion about us, the county, as if we aren't going to hear about it, and that's very concerning to me. This county has been extremely generous with providing ARPA funding. That is, the county, we could have used these for other priorities, but knowing how important infrastructure is and repairing infrastructure, water and sewer throughout this county, which are generally maintained and operated by our municipalities who comprise the Sewer Authority Board. It's very concerning to me when we bend over backwards to provide funding to them for infrastructure that is not our responsibility, and then they complain about spending funding that is their providing funding for obligations that is their responsibility, and it's hurting Oconee County's economic development right now. And we must. I'm not saying we spend any money on this. This is a solution we must come up with, working together with our municipalities. We're on the same team here. This ain't Greenville versus Spartanburg. This is, we're comprised of a number of small municipalities, and Oconee County, I think we generally have a very good working relationship. But that's probably one of the biggest problems we have right now. I think that, I'm not saying we put any money toward it, but we do need to come up with a solution with our municipal partners. Let's see here. I think we do. We've talked about communication. I pulled this back last year as well. I don't know if we need a public information officer or a communications director, or whatever we want to call them. But I think communication can make everybody's job more efficient, more cost efficient, and also get rid of some of this confusion. People tend to turn to Facebook for information, which is notably unreliable, instead of trying to find out what the truth is. And so I think that if the Oconee County government can work somehow, I don't know if it's hiring somebody or working with a vendor to develop a comprehensive communication strategy and plan for different types of information. We talked about the roads, people calling Matt saying these roads are all messed up, and it turns out they're state roads. I get the same calls, and people call about a lot of things that we don't have control over. So I'm not saying there's a silver bullet, but we know that communication is a huge challenge in any organization, and especially the government. All right. We've talked about, I don't know, so if I mention each of these, is that going to increase their tier?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's why they're color coded. Everybody has a color, so when I go back and review, I can say who contributed to what. So the ones that are singularly so far are on the board over there by themselves without a title board. In Utica, I hope y'all don't mind me not writing everything down. I think that we all have an idea what needs to be done there. And I didn't want to waste
along with
time
Utica,
making you pause
Blue
for me
Ridge,
to write.
Blue Ridge Community Center is in Utica. That is part. It's a slightly different community area, but it serves Utica, and I think continuing to support their programming there will yield huge dividends down the road, and it'll be a massive return on investment for the county. speaking of return on investment, Farm Center. Some people say it's not the county's responsibility to support agriculture, education, or tourism, or any of that stuff. But as we complain about our food prices going up, which I don't have any, Oconee County doesn't have any control over our food prices because we've centralized rather food production to a few different areas. The Midwest, the California, Mexico, South America, Florida, and we generally produce beef and chickens and eggs here. I know we have other agriculture that occurs in this county. Forestry is a huge part of it, but you can't eat wood. And so I am very concerned as we see this inflation continuing to impact the whole world. We need to be very focused on assisting our local farmers and keeping the food here. Producing food and getting it out locally, to me, it's almost a national security issue. We see all these containers backed up, all up and down there. We've got 30 ships off the coast of, docked off the coast of Charleston that can't unload their containers. I hope there's not food in those because there's a lot of things that we need, but we need food. We need a farmer 3 times a day. And I think supporting the Farm Center, I know it's a long horizon there, but we have to continue to support our farmers and provide them resources and opportunity to market locally. Let's see. Salaries for law enforcement. We've talked about I've heard it talked about adding additional officers, but we do need to make sure that we are providing funding, especially to law enforcement. They have a very difficult job. In this country, nationally, they don't feel appreciated, and it's an especially tough climate right now. I think this council has shown a commitment. You look back at the budgets since I've been on council, it's grown by probably at least $1 million a year in public safety that we're putting towards trying to make sure we repair some of the underfunding of the past and catch up to the current needs now. But I do think we need to have make sure we're competitive at least within our region with law enforcement and also with our other staff. We talk a lot about equipment operators, folks that can potentially make more money in the private sector, and fortunately they're staying with the county because of the benefits we offer and some of the other, we have a consistent supply of jobs that we need to get done. But we need to make sure that we're keeping our trained workforce and not allowing turnover to disrupt our operations. Did I talk about roads yet?
No.
Yeah, I think we just need to focus on, it's a communication issue with the general public. We need to identify county and state roads. We did a road survey, cost like $1 million or so right before I got on council. That was a very high-tech analysis of all the roads. I don't know if we need an update of that or if that's being all tracked. I hope it is, but we need to perhaps, and I know we have a priority list for county roads, but the public doesn't understand that. And they need to know, all right, your road is number 20 on this list, and we expect it, based on our current demand, it'll be taken care of in 2025 or whatever it is. I don't know. Just so they know, because a lot of this can be thrown in a spreadsheet and just update it quarterly or something. But we need to try to encourage our legislators to bring back the bacon to Oconee County, as they often do. They do. I really appreciate what all of our legislative delegation does down in Columbia. The This is a little thing, but it's a big thing in some areas. There's still a lot of tornado debris out there. There is, in neighborhoods near where I live, I know we did that waterway, we got that grant, that's awesome, and I appreciate everything that y'all are doing. I know we've got 2 pages of grants here, a page and a half. That's awesome. We need to keep going for grants. But I don't know what we can do, but some of these things are just, I don't know, tons and tons and tons of trees that have fallen from the tornado, that are in people's, I guess it's in their yards. They don't have any means to clean that up.
We can't expend public funds on private property though.
Well, but if there's any grant funding we can go for with that.
It's very difficult for us to be the grantee because it's public funds.
Well, I understand that, but in terms of federal funds or state funds for emergency, recovery or whatever we got before, those waterway things, there's still waterways that are as covered up as they were.
That was established and set by the federal government. We didn't
I know.
establish the grant.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying if we can seek funding for more
Yes,
programs like
yes,
that.
We're super proud of our
Okay. And then finally, I know some people don't think that we should do this, but I think a majority of the public who pays attention do, and who participate in our comprehensive plan development. And let me just say, I saw something in the newspaper today saying council wasn't paying attention to the comprehensive plan. This is all within there. I'm sorry, I'm not citing each reference to the comprehensive plan, but I have a copy of it. If this is the executive summary that talks about these things. The Greenway has come up numerous times in the comprehensive plan. I think that we need to continue to support that, and it is something that, and it's a failure of communication on my part. This grant that we went for, along with the City of Clemson University, and Town of Pendleton. It is a minimum, if we get it, of an 80% federal match. So we put in 20 cents, feds match at 80 cents. It is not a survey, it is to develop an engineered shovel-ready project that we then can submit for additional grant funding. And so I just want to make that clear, that this is not for a survey or some, let's just come up with some ideas. This is to develop a true plan that we can then submit and actually build it. That grant is up to 100% federal. There's potential that we won't have to expend 1 penny of county dollars or tax money to produce this. So I don't think people think that we're spending $1.4 million. That's not the case. Then the next thing that I've heard is, with regard to the Greenway, is that we're going to spend $15, $20, $30 million. There are federal build grants. These are huge programs. Tiger grants run through those, and those are an 80% match as well. So up to 100% if it's a disadvantaged area. And I believe at least parts of our county where this would be, because it goes through an opportunity zone, it's definitely a disadvantaged area. I don't know if we get 100%, but if we get this funding, it would be my request, or if we get the grant for the plans, then we should continue to seek grant funding, not pay full freight, but because that would take a lot of money. But if we can get 80 cents on the dollar paid by the taxpayers of California and New York to put greenways in South Carolina and Oconee County, I'm all for it. And it's potential that we could get 100%. So those are all the big things I have here. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for your presentation too. That was an awesome job.
Just on the comp plan stuff, the PowerPoint does not do the county accomplishments justice, and there is a Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting on March 15th here in council chambers at 4:30. And the reason the planning room is relatively short is because it's so long. There's 3 pages of comp plan initiatives that are either been accomplished or in mid-process of being accomplished, and I felt like for us to spend the amount of time that we should on those matters and the achievements outlined in the comp plan, that we should bring those to committee. And maybe what we should do is have that one in front of council instead, and I really appreciate you highlighting the grant document here, because as you see, these grants range from A to Z, and that we are very competitive in getting grants, and we take grants and grant dollars very seriously, because it combats any revenue that's required by our tax base. Pardon, Mr. Davis.
Mr. Davis?
Yeah. District 4 and outlying areas, always still keeping an emphasis on sewer south. That's to me seems to be an easy one. We're headed in the right direction for there to finish that. That's including the exit 4. So that's keeping the hammer down on economic development. But it's also seeing some growth on the housing markets, especially out there in the District 5 and District 4, on those outlying areas where they kind of touch. We're seeing a lot of growth out there, which is what we need to get those huge employers. I'd also like to propose to grade the Highway 59, as we have some plans that have come forth for OITP. We're headed in the right direction there. That was a great thing, grading that a lot of us that sit on this council know that barely happened. But that has paid not only in the educational aspect of it, but in the new investments that we've had. So I want to make sure that we keep that. So I would propose that we would move to bid out the grading on Highway 59. We did get a lot of land in the Shaw Ram area. I'd like to put a master plan in place for there so we can apply and for those grants and keep that area moving forward. That was not operated as a year-round park when I first started. It is now, and has become a true asset to that area. It's brought a lot of tourism in that side area, and just an amazing park. With that, I'd also like to propose that we need another ranger at Shaw Ram now that we're going year-round. Broadband, always still keeping the hammer down on that. Need to make sure we're headed in the right direction on that, and I probably have a every other week conversation about where that's going. On solid waste enhancements, I want to specifically touch on an area in our last meeting that we had, the Ebenezer Salem area. We've got to purchase property. If you go back, and anybody that's listening or anybody here that hasn't gone and reviewed that last presentation that Swain did, he talked about that solid waste, most of these facilities hadn't been upgraded in 30 years. And they're quarter acres. I mean, it's so the ability to put things on there and change those is very, very limited, and that was kind of laid out in there. So I wanted to look at actually purchasing a piece of property in that Ebenezer Salem area to do that. And I just wanted to I know John was leading me into that, because that was one thing that we discussed because of the amount of cars. When you add Ebenezer and the Salem area together, it's actually our two highest attended areas. I think Ebenezer was 1,200 plus cars a day. Salem was 900. And so, not that I'm saying that anything else isn't, but when I've got some that are 200 and 300 cars a day, we've got to make sure that we're keeping up, and we're not keeping up in those specific areas. So by doing that, we could open up and have additional things at those. Not necessarily am I trying to turn it into a strawberry farm, but we've got to take Strawberry Farm's getting hammered as well. I mean, some of the lines out there is just insane. So we need to really look at that and have another one. Matt brought up the brown goods bins. I want to touch base on that, because we're going to bring that forward to council to actually purchase crusher brown good bins, because the limitation of certain of these spaces, we just don't have the ability for some of these huge bins. So Swain brought up some really, really awesome crusher bins and that we're talking about in specific areas, in that Mountain Rest Long Creek area especially, to actually have a crusher bin up there that we won't have to go up there and get it, every other day when somebody throws 2 sofas in it. So, so he brought up that, so we're gonna bring that up to council. That's coming out of that committee meeting, so that'll help with that, which is huge. And I'm not just speaking at that, we were looking at 5, I think 5, isn't that what we said? 5 bins, is what we're talking about on there. So, just touching base on that. I'd like to put in, the salary increases that we've had. The reason why we've had the salary increases is because there's no planning going into it, so we're playing catch up. Rather than sitting down here budgeting and saying, hey, let's look at, I'd like to put in like a 1.5%. That barely keeps pace. I know inflation right now is crazy, but if we can put in 1.5%, we're budgeting for that, and that gives a point of where we're moving to, rather than having to come up with $4% or $1,200 here, whatever else. So I'd like to put a number of like 1.5% based on what I've seen from other places that are doing, and that'll keep stuff more in line, so we're not having to do this. And I'm not gonna serve on here forever, as all of us sitting around this table are, but I would like to show that the emphasis should be, hey, if you look at this, if you choose to take it out, that's up to you, but to me, it's better than going 4% every 2 years. That way our employees can plan for it, they can look at it and actually say, hey, here's where I'm at 5 years from now. On the sheriff, he gave a great presentation at the last meeting. I'd like to add 3 deputies. Adding any more than 3 strains that whole thing. I'd like to stay, we were looking at 2, but I'd like to look at adding 3 deputies on there. I think there's 2 or 3 openings right now, so increasing those salaries has helped him keep deputies, which is a great thing. As you heard on the number of calls is continuing going up. The deputy minimum salary, I think he was suggesting 40. I'd like to at least look at, I think we can at least do that 38.5 based on what I have looked at in the budget, based on what we have. There is a big difference in the 40 on the fringe benefits and 38.5. It does give him the ability, what can he go over on 38.5? Is it 4?
4%.
4%.
4%
So
amongst himself, 6% right for me.
So if he does get the approval together, he can go up and get close to that 40 if he needs to be. But that's kind of where the 38.5 came to. I think we're at 30, a little bit over 35 right now. So it gets us,
37, isn't it?
is it 37?
That's 37.
State average is 37,844.
It's 36 and change.
36 and something. So it's I think it's about 2, but it gets him within, if he needs to bump to that 39 or 39.7 or something like that, he can. On the farm center, I'd like to actually put a funding allocation in place. We have done a lot of in-kind things. We've done a little help here and there, but either we're gonna get into the farm center business or we're just gonna get out of it. My proposal would be $150,000 a year allocated to them so they can actually plan and do some things and continue moving on. What they have done with very little has been amazing, the amount of participation that they have over there. And from a farm to table, there ain't nobody else doing it like they're doing it. And the amount of people that we have coming in there on their farmers, the Saturday morning is continuing to blow up. So I'd like to put a number on that. Airport's easy, runway resurface, we're doing that. So that one's always one up there. Not just in Utica, on dilapidated and structure removals. This is, and I'm not talking about structures that people live in. I'm talking about burned out crime. I mean, they exist all over this county. We've done a better job at identifying those through code enforcements, but these areas, I mean, I've got one near me that there's people in and out of them. So to me, we need to do a better job at identifying those and figuring out ways to remove them. It's not, I just want to touch, it's not structures that people live in. I understand that, people live in certain structures. I'm talking about dilapidated, non-owned, abandoned structures. Utica has a ton of them. I've got several in my district. I'm sure there's several in everybody's district here. Mr. Hart brought up one about tearing down right now. Maybe we need to come up and say, hey, the county's gonna spend X, Y, Z on these structures. Fair play being one of those. There's been a lot of crime in that area. I'd also like to look at, we've bumped recreation funding up since I've got on there, but this will be all 5 entities. Right now, I think we're at 35. I'd like to take
We're at
that
30,
to.
sir.
We're at 30?
Yes, sir.
My proposal would be council to look at, and I'd like to see that in the budget, at 50,000, all 5 entities. And that's including everybody sitting around the table, the ones that they support. We used to have a concrete grinder at solid waste, and as much concrete and brick that we're getting in there, I know they're taking out a lot of the, rock quarry. I think we're missing something if we can't grind up some of that concrete and either we sell it or we use it in there. Is that thing not work anymore, the old jalopy that sits up there? The old,
Yes.
it does, but it doesn't?
I'm playing the 5th right for a minute.
Okay.
On record.
All right.
It works.
So we just need to make sure that we're, we've got so much concrete in there, it's unbelievable. And I know we're still pulling a lot of the road, so one thing that we need to look at is make sure that we're, grinding that concrete down. Because a lot of times, depending on what you're doing, if we can sell that stuff, there's other counties, there's other counties that are selling a lot of it because of what they're doing. So, speaking of road funding, Mr. Reed brought up that we're fixing to put through one of the largest paving projects we've done in how many years, did he say? 3 years, that's coming in there. So we're headed in the right direction. We're getting some funding allocated in the right areas. The capital improvement plan's given the ability for them to actually do the jobs quicker and not have to wait 3 or 4 days on a machine breaking down. So, we've done a lot of great things. And I just want to, usually when I do stuff, I like to put a figure to it to see how that works in the budget. So, that's what I got.
Okay. Good stuff.
Can I say
So-
something else?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, if you look at this, you'll see a lot of stuff that we agree on. I think a lot of emphasis gets placed on what we don't agree on. Like, I don't agree with the Greenway now, even with 20%, it's 2, 3, or 6 million. But there's still, on the core services, we agree and focus on a lot of the same areas. And I think that gets lost sometimes. And I think we can do a lot of this and provide the high-quality services that we're talking about and still don't blow the budget. I like to see us do another millage increase, maybe even bigger. We can still fit it in if we just plan accordingly. And I think we're on a much better same page than maybe we sometimes realize.
Or millage increase or millage decrease?
Decrease.
Okay.
I don't want to
I
see
thought you
a, not an increase, a decrease.
All right, I think you said increase. All right.
Or maybe I meant to say without an increase.
I didn't want something to hit you in the head when I was ducking, so.
No, I mean, we had one last year. I think we should be able to have one, maybe even more. I mean, if we continue to grow revenue like that, let's give it back to the people. Focus on the core services. That's important. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's very important. And let's take care of those first.
All the ones where a majority of y'all weighed in.
Yeah,
So,
that's, if you look at that, you can see that on the grand scheme of things, we're all close to the same page. I mean, everybody has their own little pet out there somewhere, but I mean, it should be a good year if we can stay focused on that.
Well, the biggest thing to understand is that it's not just the people, the citizens that are paying the taxes. So if you go in to actually look at who's actually paying the taxes, it's not just the people. So the things that we're trying to grow and the things we're doing, especially on the industry and things like that, it's everybody thinks that, okay, if you reduce the millage or if you do this, and I'm not saying we don't or we do, but I'm just saying though, if you go and do this, everybody, there was even a Facebook thing one time that if we gave $2 million back to the taxpayers, everybody got $35 because they took the total number of people, divided it out or whatever it was. And everybody was like, yeah, give me my $20 back, give me my $20 back. What they don't realize is the things that we're trying to do is to keep property taxes low or as they sit So we don't have to increase personal property taxes. You know, the millage and everything that we set through a couple of years ago was geared to a time to where we're trying to get into the whole thing where we may actually increase the mill, but we actually are getting more back, which is actually going to, in the long run, I know people don't understand this, but is actually saving money and looking out. You look down the road at Pickens, that's a huge increase. We haven't done that here. We've done smart increases and
A lot of this was
decreases.
due to the fees being changed around. You know, the road fees, they were collecting a road fee.
Oh,
and that was being-
I understand, yeah, but I'm just saying though, we didn't do that here, and now it was proposed by a council person that's no longer here to do a road fee, and it's insanity when you do that, because you're definitely doing exactly what you stand against. You're hurting the people. If you got four cars, let's say you got four $4,000 cars, those road fees are $25 a car. That millage increase was like 12 or 13 mills is what in that world. But we don't want to confuse people that they think that every citizen here is the ones paying 100% of it. Our goal is to, number one, make sure everybody has a job. That's what we're trying to do. Make sure they're safe. Make sure they can afford to live here. And that's getting harder at times with things going on outside of our control. But we're headed in the right direction. But if we roll back, which sometimes we need to and sometimes we don't need to, we have to look at it to go, what is the end game? Because you could set yourself up for failure, which is honestly where we were headed when I got on in 16, because it had been rolled back and the can had been smashed in the road and we were way far behind on everything. We weren't even paying retirement in there. So there was so much stuff behind that we truly had to correct. So now it is going to be no tax increases, possible millage reductions, things like that. So that's what the whole setup was. It wasn't just raise taxes so everybody can pay more. There was a reassessment that was in a low time. We got a reassessment coming in a high time. Guess what that probably means? Probably going to have to roll back, because otherwise people are going to be paying more in property tax that maybe we need, maybe we don't need. That's up to us sitting at the table. But those are things that they don't always see what we see on the inside, and it's our job to do the best to put us in a good financial situation. So when we have a COVID disaster like we had, Oconee County's steamrolling through.
We can thank a lot of reimbursables for that. Lots, thank goodness, there were lots of expenses that were reimbursable. If we had to absorb the cost that we endured, we would have been in the red. So the document I just handed out, I previously thought that I would save until budget time. I didn't realize we were gonna get into this discussion as deeply as we had, and I have, if you got 5 minutes, I'll go through it super quick. The highlight of this document is that all of our property tax collections, of all the taxes we collect, only 54.9 come from property, real property. And out of that, only 28% come from owner-occupied residences. So that is what is the blue portion here. So half of the taxes we collect only come from property, real property, and those are your types of property here. Your agricultural 4, your agricultural 6, your other partials. That's your 6%. And that's the people I told you earlier that own a majority and pay, it's getting close to 50-50, but I said 50-50, not 50-50, I'm sorry. But it's getting to the point where that balance, where residents, the burden on the residents, it will continue to decrease, and the service required for providing the residents what they have come accustomed to in services remains the same. And I hope that does offer a little bit of balance to the picture. And we'll go over this again when it comes to budget time.
Yeah, I'm just simply saying, let's meet the needs of
Absolutely.
the residents and the businesses without putting a further demand on them. The way you attract new businesses is lower taxes too.
Right.
Which we have.
So of all these things up here, everything with the brown star on it, which right now looks like sewer, roads, solid waste, Utica,
wages and salary countywide, wages and salary related specifically to the sheriff's department, and broadband is tied with airport. I will have a report back to you guys with your priorities. I will ask again that we do vote on these priorities before we go into budget season, so that we can anticipate what your expectations are to be funded or not funded. And today's what, the 18th? I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'll have it to you by March 1st. Don't we have a meeting March 1st?
Yes.
March 1st it is. I'll have a report to you that I would like for y'all to consider either taking things on or placing. And so I'll try to get that to you the Friday prior to that council meeting, so you'll have time to review what our board says today, so that we can vote on that, so that when we start creating our budget document, y'all have an expectation of what will and will not be funded without there being an additional need for a tax increase.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.